Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Welcome to part 3 in a series of live streams where I'm breaking down the Transfigured gems as soon as the information comes out from Grinding Gear Games. Note that this is going to be first impressions on these gems. There'll be a couple of mistakes here because sometimes they're quite hard to parse. Sometimes there'll be just a tricky little thing that I don't notice straight away. If I get something wrong, definitely let me know in chat if you're watching this live, because definitely chat have picked up things that I've missed on some of the other gems. Now, a quick recap on how you get these, in case you haven't been following all of the minutiae of the news. Basically, if you take the standard version of a gem into any version of the labyrinth in the game, then when you complete the labyrinth, you'll have a chance of receiving a craft as a reward that will allow you to swap that gem for a transfigured version of itself. If you don't succeed in getting that craft, you can also get a less powerful craft that will allow you to swap a blue gem into another blue gem, and that new blue gem that you get will be transfigured. For example, let's assume that you want Purifying Flame of Revelations. You could take a Purifying Flame gem with you into the labyrinth, then get to the Divine Font at the end. You'll have a chance of getting a craft that will allow you to change that gem into a Purifying Flame variant. But if you don't get that, you might get a different craft that might turn it instead into Lightning Spire Trap of Zapping or Lightning Spire Trap of Overloading. So there's two different crafts you can get there, and I believe you always get one that will preserve the color of the gem. There'll be a bunch of nuances we won't find out about this system though until it's been live, probably for a few days. For example, we don't know all the details of what the Eternal Labyrinth of, I think it's called Opportunity, the one that has the belt enchants on it. We don't know what that does as yet. Anyways, let us get ourselves going here. We're going to go through all of these gems, and I will try to keep some notes available as well, so that if you're watching this after the fact, I'll try to have those down in the description at some point, just like I did yesterday. Okay, so let's go through what we've got here. I've not looked at any of these yet, so we're just going to be going through first impressions here. Purifying Flame of Revelations. Now, I need to look up Purifying Flame, the original, because it is not a gem that I have used in a very long time. So, the original text is that a wave of divine fire deals damage in a line, then creates consecrated ground and damage in an area around the targeted location. A larger shockwave then expands outward, damaging enemies standing on consecrated ground that were not already hit. Here, a wave of divine fire deals damage in a line, then creates consecrated ground and deals damage in an area around the targeted location. Larger shockwave then expands outwards, damaging enemies standing on consecrated ground that were not already hit. That seems pretty similar. Is that exactly the same text? I think it's exactly the same text. So 300% damage, 700 milliseconds, 5.5% crit, versus 200% added damage. So this is going to be 1/3 less damage. So it needs to have something substantial that it picks up in exchange for that. Now, Shockwave deals 110% more damage versus Shockwave deals 25% less damage. So Purifying Flame of Revelation is going all in on that secondary Shockwave, and that Shockwave is then going to do considerably more damage. So with Purifying Flame Base Edition, you're getting 225% base damage on those monsters that are hit by the Shockwave, and you've also got different radius, 0.4 meters and 0.9 meters here. So here we've got 0.2 and 0.6, so it is less radius, and your final damage is a massive 420% to things you hit with a Shockwave. So very, very different here. This is going to be quite a different setup, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I actually don't know enough about the way Purifying Flame works mechanic-wise to assess whether this is good or not. I don't know if anyone has done this as yet. This is one of those gems that I'm interested if people have run Purifying Flame of Revelations. Can let me know whether you think this is going to be good or not, because I genuinely don't know. I'm not familiar with how good that shockwave effect is. But with that in mind, let's just jump on to the next gem. Oh my god, they did it. Pyroclast of Sabotage. They actually did it. Icicle Mine of Sabotage is one that we looked at earlier. That was one of the first ones they spoiled, and it was pretty bad, but it does have a niche use case. So let's bring up Pyroclast Mine so that we can compare the two here. Pyroclast Mine has a 6 mana reservation. Pay attention to that because it's going to be a lot worse on this one. It deals modest damage, 240 to 361, and it has, each mine adds 12 to 18 fire damage to hits against enemies near it, up to an absolute cap of 601 to 901. So, Pyroclast Mine of Sabotage has a higher damage cap as well as a higher number of, as well as having the higher damage numbers. Now, as well as having a higher scaling up to it. This has a very high reservation, 24 mana every time that you throw this out. The reason you want to do this though is that this is going to be basically a way to throw down, at the expense of some reservation, to throw down a little anger on the ground. When I say anger there, I mean anger in the sense of the aura anger. Anything that is in the range of the aura effect of a cluster of Pyroclast Mines of Sabotage is going to have a huge amount of fire damage added to it. Now, Pyroclast Mine of Sabotage, it's worth saying, this scales with aura effect, but the hard cap does not. So, each mine adds 37 to 56 fire damage to hits against enemies near it. If you have 100% aura effect, that goes up to 74 to 112, but the maximum stays at 1249 to 1873. The purpose of Pyroclast Mine of Sabotage is to put this into a set of March of the Legion so that you can jump up that gem level as high as possible, and then you want to throw out a few of them when you want to do really heavy damage to a single target, and you don't detonate them, because the damage from detonating these mines is terrible. Like, that's how you tickle a monster, is by detonating Pyroclast Mine of Sabotage. You just want to leave these undetonated, and until the mines time out, they're going to do really, 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 really terrifying amounts of damage there. Most builds don't want this, but the builds that want it, it is going to be unbelievable on. This was used extensively in Delve in patch 3.21. Now, in 3.21, the Pyroclast Mine of Sabotage obviously wasn't available, but what was available was a Crucible 5th column mod, and that 5th column mod effectively did the same thing that Pyroclast Mine of Sabotage did. It turned off the damage entirely, whereas Pyroclast Mine of Sabotage mostly turns off the damage, and it did so, and it caused you to much more quickly scale up to the maximum limit for the amount of aura effect that you could get there. This thing is exceptionally good for builds that have nothing to do with mines, but it is not something that goes onto a miner. So that's the trick with it. Can you Essence Worm this is a question that's come up. I need to just quickly check the exact text of Essence Worm. I think the answer is no, but I want to just check that out to be certain. Socketed gems have no reservation. Yes, you can. Yes, there's nothing preventing this from being used. I believe you can Essence Worm this. And it is also an aura tag, correct? It is also an aura tag, so that will get you gem level 23 Pyroclast Mine of Sabotage. Of course, you've got to deal with the drawbacks of Essence Worm, but that's going to be a lot of damage. It's one of the things that's going to give you amazing damage. Now, I had a question in chat from Danny who's asking about what it means when a gem doesn't have any damage numbers in their description. And the answer is usually that just means they've got base damage. So that means that they deal 100% effectiveness of added damage, and their gem level scaling is exactly dependent upon their gem level. That's normally the case. I'll have to check that out. So, Purifying Flame of Revelations is... I'm just going to write down these notes here quickly as well so that I've got those for later on. This is going to be better shockwave. I can't assess whether that's good. Pyroclast of Sabotage. High, extremely good on non-miners. Don't ever detonate it. This is an aura. Essence Worm's friend. Now, one thing we do need to say with Essence Worm here that is very important on this is that if you do put this in Essence Worm, you can't link it to minefield support, and so that means it's going to take a long time to get down an appreciable number of them. So that's a drawback you're going to have to deal with. That is a significant drawback there. But this is potentially a very, very interesting setup. Rage Vortex of Berserking. Was this one already spoiled, I wonder? I'm not sure. Raise Vortex of Berserking. This is life-based. I think that's always a life-based spell. Oh, spell. But it's, yeah, you know what I mean. Attack. So it normally costs 46 life. So normally it is 70% of base attack speed, 62% base damage. Here we're looking at the same. Now, this is the one that you lose 3 rage per second while it's accurate, and this rage loss accelerates over time. Rage Storm hits 250% more frequently until it burns up all of the rage that you've got on your character. So, this is an alternative to Berserk if you want to spend all of your rage quickly in order to do a whole bunch of extra damage. So, what's the deal here? Why is this costing so much? So, if you have the Rage Storm consumes... Base radius is 2.4 meters versus base radius is 1.8. Sacrifices 25% of rage versus sacrificing versus only just requiring rage. So it doesn't require any to conjure it. And then it's... I'm just trying to work out the exact details here. What's it? It's Rage Storm deals 5% more damage per rage sacrificed. This does not seem to be particularly great here. No rage scaling on this. I feel like that's yeah, I don't see what's going on there. Like, I would have thought that that would have Rage Vortex. Expect this to have rage scaling, like rage expenditure scaling or something like that. As it stands, I'm going to call this a not usable gem currently. Unless there's more information about it that we don't know, or I'm missing something. It's got 250% more frequently, but isn't that in the normal version as well? Yeah, Rage Storm hits 250% more frequently as part of the baseline Rage Vortex. It's the skill. It's basically part of the base Rage Vortex anyway. Saying it's more like Blade Vortex. Oh, it's attached to you. That makes sense. All right, thank you, Seth. See, this is why I like having hundreds of people here to correct me when I make a mistake. The key difference is that the Rage Vortex appears to stay attached to you, does it? At least that's... So it's... Just be clear on that. Where is the exact wording? It's Rage Storm attached to you versus create a Rage Storm that's sent forward. So, Rage Vortex of Berserking is indeed more like Blade Vortex. That is the key difference there. That is the unique appeal on that. And so this is functionally like Blade Vortex. Attack version of Blade Vortex. That is cool. That is very, very different to the base gem. As for sustaining that though, that's a lot of rage drain. Lose 3 rage per second, then 3.6 and so on and so forth. That's really unsustainable. So it's cool, but it's not something that is necessarily sold. Yeah, the duration is as long as you can sustain it until you just run right out of, until you run entirely out of rage there. Okay, let's have a look at the next setup that we've got here. So, raise Spectre of Transience. Raises a spectral version of a defeated foe as a temporary minion to fight for you in battle for a duration. So, Spectres have a base duration of 30 seconds. I need the hard numbers of Raise Spectre here in order to just compare these two, because they do quite different things. Here we have 28 second. So here we have 28 mana, 850 milliseconds, and Raise Spectre of Transience is 23 mana and 70 milliseconds. So it is 700 milliseconds. It is faster. 30 seconds base duration. That's really short. Keep in mind that this means you're going to be forced to use spectres that are local to that zone, I think. Unless, oh no, you should be able to raise. You should be able to raise things that are not, that you've desecrated in there. It's just that you're probably going to get that wrong at some point. You're probably going to desecrate something wrong. Not desecrate, raise something that is not the original intended Spectre. So I think this is going to end up with a weaker choices of Spectres. This is going to be for combat minions rather than for bringing in a minion that is a no-one buff. So, 5 maximum raise spectres, 30% LE res, 55% movement speed, and move speed is capped. what do we got here? We've got move speed is capped 55% more, minion move speed 50% ally res, so it's a little bit lower, but you're capped at 2 specters here. So Ray's Spectre of Transience gives you a lot more. Now we have the critical strike chance stuff. We've got 776 additional accuracy and level 70 versus these temporary specters. They're still level 70, they're still 776, but they also have this 1000% increased critical strike chance. So basically, you are going to be using much weaker specters typically with this, and you're going to be spending more player actions on recasting these. In exchange for that, though, you're going to have an army of specters, and they're going to be critting. So this is quite... yeah, I think this is the Soul Wick gem, isn't it? Soul Wick unique jewel. I think that's how it works. Soul's Wick. So this is the one that specters have massively increased critical strike chance, base duration of 20 seconds, do not travel between areas, and essentially, yeah, you're right, this is the Soul's Wick gem baked in. Quite like that. That is a cool setup. That is a really, really cool setup there. We're just going through them in order, Danny, so this is just the 4th gem so far. So Ray's Spectre of Transience does not fit on any existing minion builds that use specters. This is entirely a new build, and how good it is something we've just got to test out. I really can't answer that as yet. That's going to be something that you'd have to play around with it. It is my experience, though, that just raising random specters tends to be disappointing, but that repeatedly raising minions after your specters die, you eventually raise something that pushes your desired specters out of your desecrate pool sometimes. Because I do think there's a limit to the number of things that can become specters in a zone, or you have a whole bunch of messy problems that come up. So this is going to result in lower quality specters, but more of them. One more question. How does that number 5 vary with gem level here? So this is going to be good. Valhalla, the gems are going to come out of running the labyrinth and taking in like a Ray's Spectre gem, and you'll have a chance of getting a craft that'll turn it into Ray's Spectre of Transience. If you do not get that craft, then you get something that might turn it into a different blue Transfigured gem. So you might end up getting Lightning Spire of Zapping instead. So the higher the tier of the lab, I think, the more chance you've got of getting the same gem back. You also won't be required to commit to taking that trade. You'll be able to see what you're going to get if you get the random gem, and then if you get something that's rubbish, you can back out. Okay, let's just have a quick... let's put down a quick note here. Ray's Spectre of Transience. This is Soul's Wick, but better. So that's basically Soul's Wick, but better. One other thing I wanted to check, is this something that's still available? Because this kind of feels like you could get both. It's drop disabled, and it is a legacy item, as is removed from the Valor plus dual drop in 3.23. So versions that existed. This can be really, really strong if you're playing in standard. To have a Soul's Wick, because this is going to work incredibly well in conjunction with this gem. So if you're a standard player, definitely play this. Definitely grab a Soul Wick and play around with that. Okay, Ray's Zombie of Slamming. This is going to be the next one here. So this is going to raise a zombie from a corpse, which will follow you and attack enemies with a melee strike and an AoE slam that cannot be evaded. I feel like this is just the current Raise Zombie. So if we go down to Raise Zombie here, it's 38% more life versus Raise Zombie of Slamming is 76% CDR, 76% AoE, maximum 7 zombies. And I feel like a lot of this is... Let's just show differences on this. Used to be 6, and it has the same text. Yeah. Okay, so Raise Zombie is changing. Raise Zombie is being simplified. Raise Zombie of Slamming restores the old version, the old functionality of Raise Zombie. So if you want the 3.22 behavior of Raise Zombie, then Raise Zombie of Slamming is what you're going to want. Plus, you can get one more zombie out of it. If you are fine with 323 behavior of Raise Zombie, then you don't want this fancy gem. So this is just basically an upgrade on existing Raise zombie. So that's something that's cool here. I'm just going to put a note down to myself on that. That's Raise zombie of slamming. This is 3.22 Raise zombie, but with +1 max zombie, which is, yeah, basically better than the current versions. Raise zombie hasn't been a popular gem for a while, but it's still something that they've got an extra little bit of power there, so it's definitely got a use to it. Okay, let's have a look at Raise zombie of... Oh yeah, Raise zombie of falling, of course. I did put this into... I did put this one into the... what do you call it? I put this into the thumbnail for this because it's everyone's favorite gem here. On the shirts, Nowbie, this one's just from AliExpress. It's one of my favorites. This one, the Guitar of Ice and Fire. Are the meteor zombies a skill to spell sling with? I just love all of the sort of weird and wonderful combinations people are coming up with here. Now, very important to note, this is a minion skill still, so it's going to scale a little bit differently to some other spells, and the zombie that you conjure in the air above enemies, and then that falls and dive bombs onto an enemy and goes splat, that is going to be a zombie that is going to make one attack at 2.5 base damage on it for the gem. So, sorry, 2.5 the base damage that a zombie would do. Then it goes away and you never need to deal with that zombie again because you're conjuring new ones that can then fall onto enemies. Now, one thing I did want to say with this, I have been running a little bit of a campaign over on the Grinding Games website, which I'll put a link to below, where I am wanting Grinding Games to add a Toucan Zombie MTX for this. So I'll put a link to that down in the description of this, not in the description of this video, I might do it in the description as well, but I put it into the chat right now. So if you want to see a Toucan version of Raise Zombie of Falling, then that's where to do that. That's where to let Grinding Gear Games know you think it's a good idea. Now, this is one that I have no idea how strong this will be, but it is just such a cool mechanic. It's not just 2.5 times damage, because it's also got that 15% chance to deal double damage. I assume that that is a quality bonus. The minion hit can't be evaded, doesn't require a corpse, it just conjures the zombie above things, and essentially I think this is Raise Meteor, or not some meteor spell, Firestorm of Meteors. This is Firestorm of Meteor, but with very different graphics and very different scaling options. And so there's a whole bunch of things that are going to be really fun with this. If this gem is at all good, we're going to see some great memes. We've got so many songs that this will work well with. You've got Weather Girls, It's Raining Men. You've got Drowning Pool, Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, both of which tell the same story, just from a different perspective. And you've got a whole bunch of other things that will just work really well with this. So I hope this gem is good. I hope this gem is a top 20 gem by power, so that people feel like you're playing it not just hating yourself when you're playing it, but you feel like it's something quite strong. Now, there is some talk about trying to use this in Wardloop. Something I do want to raise about Wardloop is that the changes that are taking place to a bunch of things in the game will make Wardloop current builds not work. They're all going to be fixable. It's just that Wardloop is a very tightly organized build in terms of some of the numbers that are involved in it. And cast when damage taken alternate quality going away is going to change a whole bunch of Wardloop builds, as will some other things. So Wardloop's going to survive as a build archetype, but don't play it early unless you intimately understand all of the nuances of it, because I think there's going to be a lot of troubleshooting needed in order to get Wardloop into a playable state. But that said, yeah, with Wardloop you will be able to just make it rain down dead bodies as you're running around, and I think that will be quite funny. Now, can you put zombies on totem support and create your own zombie cannon or zombie catapult that way? I believe you can. There's nothing indicating that you can't do that unless Spell Totem is allergic to minion gems. I want to just check that. So I'll just do that quickly in the background. Spell Totem support. When we say in the background, it's actually in the foreground. Let's get an answer on that. Yes, you can. Of course, you can use it with totems. I was forgetting that skeleton totems was something that has often been used in the past. Fun fact, unless this has changed, I think actually skeleton totems are really good on Searing Exarch's bullet hell phase, because they can just conjure a whole bunch of skeletons that then eat those meteors for you. So that as well as Maven destroying them, you've also got your skeletons doing so as well. Can you use mines for Zombie of Falling? I see no reason why not. So there should be a whole bunch of things there. Eddie Upfish is asking, what's the expected DPS of this? The answer is I just don't know. It's 2.5 raised zombie hits, but I think it's hard to get numbers on exact damage numbers for minions. I think this is just going to be one that you're going to have to test out. The way to test the amount of damage that you do is to go into a scoured Guardian of the Phoenix map when your gear isn't yet ridiculous. And when you're doing that, let's just go Guardian of the Phoenix. The Guardian of the Phoenix has a known number of hit points, 32,578,382. And so you can just drop a whole bunch of zombies on his head, and you can even count the number it takes to kill him if you want. It's a really good way to do it because he always has the same hit points. There's no map mods in play because it's scoured, and you also don't feel terrible about running a Guardian of the Phoenix map scoured, just because you'll get a Phoenix token back from it that's going to be worth as much as the map was. So a whole bunch of stuff there is worth keeping in mind. And yeah, someone's just mentioned that they've been watching this on double speed. That is something I recommend if you've joined the stream. If you've just joined the stream in the last 5 minutes or whatever, jump back to the start and put it on 175% speed. I find is the fastest it's listened toable. Now, can this critically strike? I believe it would have your minion. I believe this would inherit your minion critical strike. So as long as your minions have non-zero crit strike chance, yes, this should be able to crit. That's my understanding. It looks like Zizaran is going to be running a Raise Zombie Mines build at some point, so that's going to be interesting. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that'll be played around with this, and there should be a whole bunch of crazy stuff that you can get going with it. Minion on death effects proc with this, but minion instability does not proc with this because the zombie goes from alive to dead without ever being below 50% life. It's never on low life. It's always just either binary, it's alive or it's dead. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Request that's come up in chat for Path of Building for Consecrated Path of Endurance. I feel like you could just you could start with a Juggernaut, that version of Consecrated Path on that, and then tweak it around a bit, I think. That is on my short list of things to look into, though. But that should be a starter. Then you can optimize from there. How does it interact with the Baron? That is a very good question. I want the exact wording of the Baron. Because this item has been bad for a while, so I've forgotten it. +2 socketed minion gems, so that should be more damage if you've got them in there. Minion life is boosted. Half of your strength is added to your minions. The additional minions... Okay, so... Yeah, this should give you a whole bunch of life leech, assuming you've got the 1,000 strength. The maximum number of raised zombies stat is not very useful for this. So with the raised zombie of falling, you don't, like, the zombies don't really count as alive. As long as you've got the capacity to cast zombies, so you haven't got 2 Montragul's Grasps up, you can keep spawning them. So yeah, you should be able to life leech from it. Okay, let's jump over to Scorching Ray of Immolation. So this is going to be additional debuff stages at 14% of damage and 1834 base damage. Okay, this looks like it's a Scorching Ray that gets going much faster. Let's just check out the base stats of this gem. So base stats of this gem, 780.7, and additional debuff stages intensify that by 70%. So that is going to be at 8 stages, which is the max from memory on this gem, unless that's changed at some point. Yeah, maximum of 8 stages. So it's going to be plus 490%. That's essentially times 6. That's going to be about 4,200 at max stages. And it does 25% is the exposure. This looks like it doesn't have anything about exposure, and it's only gaining 98%, so it's less maximum damage, but it's going to be better in for short casts. So Scorching Ray of Immolation is just a short, sharp burst. Unfortunately for this skill, I don't think the base fire damage per second is there, even just when you're getting started. How long does it endure, I guess, is the other question. So base duration is 3 seconds. Base duration is 1.5. Okay, that is the real benefit. So if you lightly touch a monster with Scorching Ray of Immolation, then it's going to stay on fire for 3 seconds, and that's going to be really dangerous. If you can just hit them quickly, that's its benefit. In a sense, it's not really soul rend. What's something that you just touch quickly an enemy and then it just burns out over time? Like, I guess in a way, this is not Ignite, but it feels a bit like Ignite in the sense that you hit an enemy quickly and then it dies over time from one hit. So this is, it's a shorter casting time as well, apparently. 180 milliseconds versus Scorching Ray is 250. Oh yeah, that's way better. I feel like Scorching Ray is a gem that the years have not treated kindly. Scorching Ray of Immolation is superior for most purposes, but the times that you're able to sit still for a long time and just channel Scorching Ray, cough cough, you've got a totem doing it, then the baseline Scorching Ray is superior. So this is going to be better. One frequently asked question that's come up again in chat is, what happens when a gem is missing from this list? It may mean that there's not going to be a transfigured version, but it probably means that Grinding Gear Games is still figuring out some of the numbers on it. And ideally, we will get those tomorrow, because it's now only 2 days until it's going to be League start. 2 days from now, some of us will be already sort of doing the second Labyrinth, I think. It's getting close now. It's getting really, really close. So let's just quickly take a note here that Scorching Ray of Immolation, this is actually quite an interesting gem. This removes exposure, more damage faster, less damage on deep channel, light touch only longer burn after. I feel like this is actually a reasonably good gem. That's my thought. Now the question of exposure is very build dependent. Scorching Ray is one of the best settings for exposure. This exposure is a completely wasted stat on Chieftain, because Ramako Sun's Light is something that replaces it. And so that's something to keep in mind. If you wanted to play this, Chieftain Ascendancy feels like it's a spot for it. Now, in terms of the other things that will come up here is that Righteous Fire does want the exposure. The thing is that Righteous Fire wants exposure that kicks in a bit faster than an 8-channeled Scorching Ray. That's one of the reasons that Scorching Ray fell out of favour with it. I feel like Scorching Ray totems are still a genuine option for Righteous Fire if you want to inflict exposure. It's not a popular option at the moment, but it is a genuine option, and that's something that you would not get from Scorching Ray of Immolation. But if you're self-casting it, then unless you're standing still for a protracted period, I'm not that sold on it. With Righteous Fire, you're going to want to have a secondary damage source. Fire Trap has won the battle of the 3 secondary damage sources that people use. There's Fire Trap, there's Searing Bond, which I actually played in 322. It was fine, but I do think Fire Trap is probably a bit better. And then there's Scorching Ray, which I think is worse than Searing Bond. But it's still something that's an interesting setup there. If you are set on playing Scorching Ray, though, I would go Chieftain, Righteous Fire with Ramako. I feel like that's the best way to do it. Okay, Shattering Steel of Ammunition. These are really hard to parse. There was something that the Lancing Steel one I ended up with a few things wrong on yesterday, so let's just bring up Shattering Steel. So here we have Swing an Axe or Sword, firing projectiles which shatter on impact or soon after being launched, dealing area damage in front of where they shatter. Versus Shattering Steel of Ammunition. Swing an Exile Sword, consuming steel shards, so it's going to have the steel shard protection. This is going to then protect you for a little while, and fire projectiles which shatter on impact or soon after being launched, dealing area damage in front of where they shatter. Steel shards are gained with the Call of Steel skill, which this gem will also give you. So it's going to take up 2 buttons on it. So let's have a quick look. We have 85% speed, 159% damage. Versus baseline is also the same. This has added phys damage and fires 2 additional projectiles, 40% impale and 40% impale effect. Versus here we have the same sort of damage, 3 projectiles, steel ward if you have at least 2 steel shards up to a maximum of 6. Each steel ward grants 8% chance to block projectile attack damage, 40% impale. If you don't have any steel shards, it only fires 1 projectile, 40% impale effect again. Projectiles deal damage, more damage with hits per steel shard consumed at the start of their movement. So basically this is a much more complex version of it. Much more complex version here. This is going to be something that is going to take a lot more messing around. It's stronger if you're willing to go to the effort of using Call of Steel regularly, but Call of Steel does have a cooldown on it, and so you'll need to keep that in mind. That's something that is going to take a fair bit of messing around. On the heralds, I don't believe there are any heralds that are coming up in this. I think that that's not going to be in the list. I don't think they're getting any transfigured versions. It's just things that are your primary skill, and whilst heralds can be a primary skill, I think Grinding Gear Games consider that to be a little bit of an unusual choice of a primary skill. So they aren't going with it because also they'll still be used a lot. So Shattering Steel of Ammunition. This is going to return the Call of Steel mechanic to this gem, and is therefore going to makes it more complex because of steel shards. More powerful with micromanagement. Base Shattering Steel better if otherwise. Skill better otherwise. So that's if you're unwilling to do all of the micromanagement that is necessary in order to make that gem into something that is effective. Okay, so let's have a look now. Shield Crush of the Chieftain. This is a fire-based version. That's cool. Swipe your shield, dealing area damage in 3 waves in front of you. Enemies can be hit by 2 overlapping waves. Base offhand fire damage. Additional fire damage based upon the armor stat of your shield. Does up to 10% more damage with hits to closer enemies. And Central Wave has 88% more area of effect. I need the hard numbers on this to compare it. So Shield Crush, this is the Crush, yeah. Okay, so this is 172 to 258 base offhand physical damage versus, oops, wrong one. So it's a higher amount of damage. 7 to 9 is what's added, and that's 5 to 7. And it also has this additional more multiplier. Central Wave has 88% more area of effect. Even though the numbers seem strictly better on this, fire damage is just so much worse in general and physical damage that I feel like these two might be competitive. In fact, with base Shield Crush probably being better. Let's look at the other stats as well. 1 second attack time, 500 millisecond. 5% crit, and 10 mana. There's sometimes some changes to those. It's also slower as well. Look, honestly, I thought Shield Crush of the Chieftain was, before I noticed that it's slower attack speed and a lot slower, I thought they were comparable. Now I think Shield Crush of the Chieftain is worse. I think that is going to be considerably weaker. One question and also, yeah, no interactions with evasion is another good point here. It is strength based only. Now, one question that has come up a bit in chat is what's happening with Gem Cutter Prisms in this league. Gem Cutter Prisms are already rare. People are saying that they feel like they've probably made GCPs rarer. I think GCPs are only 5 times as common as Divines as direct drops, so they're already rare. It's quite common for me to reach level 20 gems and only have 3 or 4 GCPs that have been direct monster drops. So that's going to be significant. There's going to be a lot more pressure on GCPs. GCPs will be... I don't think they're going to be as valuable as Exalted Orbs are, but I do think they're going to be sort of starting to push towards that. Definitely more than Sextants, I feel, because there's going to be a lot of demand for them. Now, late in a league, that's going to change. Late in a league, people generate a lot of them from Searing Exarch content and stuff like that. They're going to start falling off. But there's no super great farming maps for Gemcutter Prism Divination cards. A lot's going to come down to the overhaul of heist rewards that they're doing. So that's Shield Crush of the Chieftain. I am very much not sold out on. I'm very much not sold on this. It is only, as people are saying, it is only on armor. I don't think that's going to matter for the sort of character that would use this, but I just don't think the numbers are here. And I'm going to put a note to myself to that effect. Shield Crush of the Chieftain. STR scaling only. Fire converted and slower. Not sold as fire inherently worse. As fire damage inherently worse than phys. And higher numbers don't make up for this. Not by enough to make up for this. I want to say strength scaling only. What I mean is armor scaling only. Armor scaling only. That's the correct word there. So this one I feel is my first thoughts on this is that it's a brick. It does have more damage, but it's not that great. Hey, thank you for the gifted memberships there. So that's the equivalent of the Twitch version, which is the gift subs there. Okay, let's just jump over. Jacob, that's a good point on Edge. I'm not going to try and learn Edge on stream. And honestly, because of the way that Edge kept using basically browser hijacking strats earlier in Windows 10's lifetime, I've treated it as malware ever since then, because it's so similar to the way that malware worked, where it just automatically sets itself as your default browser at various times. I've just generally had this attitude that Edge, it may have improved since then, but I've regarded it as malware since it did that. I used to keep trying it every time there was a big update to Windows 10. I was like, oh, let's give Edge another shot. And it was sort of getting a bit closer to feature parity, but then eventually I found that it was like, I didn't want to support something that kept making itself my default browser without giving me the option of stopping that. And okay, let's keep going through as to what else we've got here. So, Siege Ballista of Splintering. This is something that summons a ballista totem that attacks with forking arrows. +3 number of totems. Totems last 8 seconds. Projectiles fork twice. So that is the equivalent of having awakened added fork on there. Awakened fork support, sorry, that's the correct name of that gem. And summons a ballista totem which uses this skill. Projectiles have 40% chance for an additional projectile when forking. So this is miles better than awakened fork as well. Let's just get the details of Siege Ballista base gem so that we can compare them. Siege Ballista base gem is going to be 9 additional pierces, +3 totems, 8 seconds, and 5% IAS. This is 145% of base damage. Siege Ballista of Splintering is 130% base damage. Attack speed is 50%. What's the attack speed here? Also 50%. And you have that 5% attack speed per totem, which this doesn't have. Okay. Siege Ballista baseline is going to be better for single target, but this is a very different gem. Like, this ability to have this massive fork this is going to be cool. I really, really like this now. I really, really like this. Side note, someone's asking me what my thoughts are on Opera. I think that's the one that was... Is that the one that was trying to get at that... messaged me with a really badly worded offered a paid promotion offer. I think it may have been Opera. It was a browser. Anyways, I wasn't sold on it, so I didn't go with it. But they were offering me to do a paid promotion for them. So, yeah, it is the case that if you get a lot of totems down, like if you're using that gem that, that bow Iron Commander that lets you get a whole bunch of extra siege ballistas based upon your dexterity or strength, depending which version you've got, that is going to be the better option. But I do think Siege Ballista of Splintering is going to clear pretty well on a very different build. And I'm kind of curious to see what people do with this. For bossing, definitely use classic Siege Ballista, but for clearing, this just feels like it's going to hit a lot of stuff. Really, really like this setup here. So, at the very least, this may or may not end up being good, but what it definitely is, it's cool. This does a lot of damage. So let's have a quick look here at what we've got. Yes, you have missed the start in Furnace, but being on YouTube rather than Twitch, you can just rewind. That's something that's really useful with YouTube. And then you can jump up the speed as well. If you jump to 175% speed, you'll catch up in a while. It'll take you a while to catch up. So I'm just going to put a note here. Siege Ballista of Splintering. Massive damage projection, but quite a bit worse damage than baseline. 10% less from gem stats, and misses out on IAS, on increased attack speed. Misses out on attack speed increases. Very interesting. Damage projection. So yeah, that's going to be something to play around with. I like this gem a lot. As I say, I'm not going to say that this is good, but I'm going to say it's cool, and that's one of my favorites. Okay, we're going to jump down here and go with Smite of Divine Judgement. So this is the gem that I think we saw being used by an Animate Guardian in one of Grinding Gear Games' videos. I definitely need to compare this to baseline Smite as well. So baseline Smite is 273% damage versus 85% attack speed, and it has its aura mechanics, and it also has shock. No, the shock is part of that. But the main thing is 273% and 273 and 80, and then of course, yeah, there's all that aura, and there's lightning strikes one additional target. Smite of Divine Judgment is going to then perform a melee attack and causes lightning to strike nearby enemies, dealing damage in an area. Each target can only be hit once by this skill. Requires a sword, axe, mace, scepter, staff, or unarmed. Slightly less damage than baseline Smite, and does not have the aura mechanics, but 38% more area damage. So that actually ends up meaning it's going to deal more damage overall. And then on top of that, you've got this lightning strikes 3 targets within 7 meters. That's a long way. This is a strike. This, in conjunction with anything that causes you to strike more targets, is going to just... it seems like it's going to hit a lot of things. I feel like this is a really good setup. I feel like this is a really, really, really good setup here. This is going to hit a lot of targets. It's going to hit pretty hard. It's got this more area damage so that you can then... you can hit... You hit a lot of targets with this, and you can do a lot of damage to the tougher ones. I really like the look of this. So this is going to be a really, really strong primary skill. And I like what Siddharth is saying in chat that, yeah, you use Vile Smite for the aura. So Vile Smite is also really good for clear as well, but it's something that you can start a boss fight, you can drop down Vile Smite, and then you can use Smite of Divine Judgment to kill a boss. It's only slightly worse than baseline Smite is for that, but you can also just map with this and have the Vile version attached. I feel like this is going to be one where the level 21 Vile version of this gem is going to be really in demand because of that, because there is a big jump for Vile Smite for the aura. There is a big jump between gem level 20 and 21. I'm also curious to see how much this ends up being used in a March of the... oh no, it doesn't work with March of the Legion, because the Smite of Divine Judgment gem, which probably does scale a little bit with gem levels, that doesn't have the aura tag. So you'll notice that the aura tag is missing. The Smite gem is tagged aura, and the Val Smite is also tagged aura, but there is no aura tag on Smite of Divine Judgment. So that means that whilst your Val Smite would get all the levels from March of the Legion, you probably don't want to use Smite of Divine Judgment in there. You could also use Smite. You would use a second Smite setup with, say for instance, Smite linked to Empower, linked to Increased Duration, and that could be Val Smite as well. And then you could use Smite of Divine Judgment as your primary attack skill as well. So you have a lot of options there, and I really like this. This takes one aspect of the Smite skill and it dials it up to 11, but at the expense of sacrificing some of the versatility. In a lot of ways, this is the simpler version of the gem too. Clarifying the deal of what's going to happen with Val versions of these gems, if you were to corrupt Smite of Divine Judgment in a way that causes it to become a Val skill, then the non-Val version of that would be Smite of Divine Judgment. The Val version of that gem would be Val Smite. Not Val Smite of Divine Judgment, it would be Val Smite. So there's a whole bunch of things you could do there, but this is just a very high damaging skill that's going to have really good clear. This is going to be basically... I feel like this is going to have clear in line with like what... it's going to be Frostblades, basically. It's Frostblades level clear, and it's going to just do that with while not being the same skill as Frostblades. So some people will prefer Frostblades, some people will prefer Smite of Divine Judgment, but it's going to work in much the same way because that extra Lightning Strike is really good. And let's have a look-see in terms of, Smite of Divine Judgment. And this is going to be all in on the attack component. If you get the Val version, it will be Val Smite, and we'll provide the aura you want. As well. So that's really, really strong. As for the question of this, is this going to be a decrease in power overall? I don't think it will be. Grinding games haven't, every time they've tried to lower power, they've crept it back in really quickly. Like, we're in a situation where to give you a sense as to just how much power creep we've had, there was a period in the game where you needed to be a very strong player to beat the level 75 lab. There has been so much power creep over the last 7 or 8 years that went from being a very strong player only content to now the level 83 labs are easier than the level 75 lab was back then. We've also seen that with Uber Elder. When Uber Elder was added, it was the second hardest boss in the history of the game. Only Uber Atzri had been harder. Now, there's lots of people that haven't beaten Uber Elder now, but no one feels like this fight is tremendously beyond me after playing the game. They might feel like they're not there, but they don't feel like they could never learn it. That they're going to need to learn to play a fight perfectly for 7 or 8 minutes in order to beat it. These days, it's like you can make mistakes and still beat Uber Elder. So yeah, I think we're going to see more of that. Honestly, I think that if grinding your games, they're in this awkward spot where if they don't do something about high-end player power in a big way, they're going to have real problems with the monster hit point caps soon. Because monsters, the way the game is programmed, there's a cap in place on hit points on monsters, which is 2 to the power of 31 hit points. So about 2 billion. The reason that the Uber bosses have damage taken reductions instead of just higher hit points is because that specific cap was being pushed into by those fights. If you have a double more life Searing Exarch with 6 players in there, without that cap, without that thing, it would actually exceed the hit point cap. And so they ended up changing around things so that wouldn't be the case. But the hit point cap is going to be more and more of a problem because to design content that's aspirational in PathOfExile now, grinding your games have to just make the stats so high on it. And that's going to continue being the case until they either get rid of the hit point cap and we start seeing bosses aspirational content at least with 5 billion, 10 billion hit points, or they don't get rid of the cap and then they'll have to do another squish. Yeah, I remember people paying carries for Merciless Lab, and this was not this was not out of laziness. This was out of having tried and failed 4 or 5 times, and that's the level 68 lab, not the 75 lab. So that's how much. That is how much power there has been, and yeah, all of the bosses in the delve mines. Like once you get in the delve mines fairly deep, you will hit the hit point cap. On bosses, I think the bosses hit the hit point cap about depth 1200 or so. And earlier than that if they've got certain mods, and a lot earlier if you've got multiplayer scaling in play. But the boss, even the tankier yellow monsters will hit the hit point cap at some point as well. I think that's quite some way down. Or yeah, phase bosses. Like there's a whole bunch of things they can do that address it indirectly. Like they can use the damage reduction, the system they've used on the Uber bosses. They can use bosses that heal like Cirrus or Maven or the like. There's a whole bunch of ways they can make fights that aren't over in 5 seconds, but they're probably going to need to do something about the most top-end scaling. Like look for scaling mechanisms that only top 1% players use and gut those. That's the way they can fix a lot of those things. So like yeah, there's a couple of nerfs in here, but it's not going to be overall. It's not like people are going to be behind after this. Or if they are, it'll be because we haven't yet worked out the best ways to address the new meta. Okay, so let's have a look at Sovereign of Reaping. This is going all in on the projectile damage aspect, and the effectiveness of added damage here is 400%. This is huge amounts of damage. This is the hardest hitting chaos hit spell that we've got, and it leeches life as energy shield. Okay, this is exciting. This thing is really, really, really strong. So we've got here 7% crit as well. So, okay, the cast time on this is not fast. This is a mine skill. The reason I say this is for mines is even though that's going to waste the spell damage leached as energy shield component, this is just doing so much damage that if you can just preload a whole bunch of these and set them off, Sovereign of Reaping is going to really, really tear things apart. This could be cast on crit. It doesn't pierce, that is correct. It is a single projectile hit. So you're probably going to want to build a little pierce into your build. That's going to be something you'll need to figure out how to do. But the damage is just so high. Cast on critical strike, this with pierce looks really good. Maybe it's a ranged cast on crit setup again, something we haven't really seen people do very much lately, and that can then have both aspects get value out of the pierce. One question is, yeah, does this still track? Let's have a quick look on that. Does Sovereign actually call out that it's tracking mechanics? And so it is... It turns towards enemies in front of it. That's the exact wording that it's got. It turns towards enemies in front of it. No, this doesn't appear to have that text. So that seems that Sovereign of Reaping may just go straight. This is going to be this is an interesting setup. One of the things that's come up here is comparisons to Forbidden Rite. I think there is some justification in comparing this to Forbidden Rite, but it also is going to be one of those things where they can be a bit tough to compare as well, because Forbidden Rite requires you to build your character in a certain defensive way to use it. So you then need to look at the question of applying damage projection. This has no damage projection built in. It's got the Fireball weakness, except it's actually worse than Fireball in damage projection. You have a delayed damage projectile, and it's got to travel to the enemy. It then hits one enemy, and that's the end of it. So you're going to need to find Pierce in order to solve that. I think Pierce is the lowest opportunity cost way of doing it, but you could also experiment with achieving that same goal through the Deadeye Ascendancy is the other way you could do it. Let's just check. I just want to make sure Deadeye still all works with spells. I think it does, but I just want to confirm that because I know it did in the past, but you know, things change. Skills fire 2 additional projectiles, unconditional. Skills chain +1 times, unconditional. And then you could pick up the Gale Force and Tailwind section. So you could go Gathering Wind and definitely get something. Or you could even go increase effect of your marks. This is treated as a projectile, right? So you could then use it as a... you then use it with Sniper's Mark and Mark Effect. You could use Chain or Fork, yes, but I feel like it's a Deadeye hit. Now that puts you in the wrong spot for a lot of the Chaos stuff support on the tree, but I do think that you have to solve damage projections somehow, and this is the way to do it. And I think that the Deadeye setup actually works even if you go with Mines. So that's my first thought here. Will this work with Nimbus and have the projectiles return? Yes, it should. That should work there. It's a lot of damage though, and it's definitely something to mine potentially on a Deadeye. I think that's the way that I like it here. Gloomfang would also be an option. Yeah, Gloomfang is another way of getting +1 chain, but I think the Deadeye Ascendancy gives you too much to not use here. Because the other alternative is the Occultist. So just for those of you that aren't familiar with Gloomfang, here it is. It's +1 chain. It's got proj speed, which is really good, but generally Gloomfang, you want it to be, you want your projectiles to be things like Ethereal Knives, where you can chain around a lot, get that extra damage as chaos damage as well. So that's my first thought there. Is this the final batch? I think the answer is no. I think there's going to be one more, but I'm not sure on that. Soulrend of Reaping. This is basically clunkier than Fireball. Soulrend of Reaping. Clunkier than Fireball, but more damaging. Then Fireball, but more damaging. Deadeye Mines. Deadeye Mines will definitely work. It's just a question of whether it's too clunky or whether it's something that's an effective, effective enough to use. Okay, we have Soulrend of the Spiral. Here, this is very slow cast time, 900 milliseconds. Anything that's 900 milliseconds screams out, please use me with Mines. Effectiveness of added damage 170%. Fires a series of projectiles in a spiral that turn towards enemies in front of them, damaging and piercing through those they hit, and leeching some of that damage as energy shield. As the projectiles travel, they repeatedly apply a short but powerful chaos damage over time debuff to each enemy in an area around them. Okay, this is the spiral mechanics. So this is not Sire of Shards. This is quite different. Okay, let's start with the memes with this. This is going to put you at the center of a vortex of Celestial Cats. If you use this in conjunction with Soulrend of the Spiral and Celestial Cat microtransaction, this is going to look hilarious. It's just going to be spiraling cats all over the screen. So this is basically Spectral Helix as a spell, and I just cannot judge this until I see its pathing. This is a cool concept, and I really don't know how good this is going to be here. Mana cost 64 mana. Oh, ouch, 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 ouch. So let's just quickly go Blast Chain Mine Support, just check something out on that. That does override. Oh no, it's a multiplier. Oh no. Yeah, that's a very good point. I hadn't noticed that little nasty hidden there. That is an unbelievable amount of mana. How are you gonna pay that? You've got to be Eldritch Battery for that, right? You've just got to be Eldritch Battery to function with this, and that means that it's cast on Critical Strike on an Eldritch Battery build, and then hopefully, does this have the Chaos Leech? It doesn't, does it? It doesn't have the Chaos Leech. But then that doesn't really work. Like cast on Critical Strike, you're then not scaling the base chaos damage per second. You're only scaling the hit component. This is going to be a really, really hard one to make work. Yeah, you could Archmage it, but then that's sort of not going to scale. Like chaos damage and lightning damage don't scale together very well unless it's in really weird scenarios like Voltaxic Rift. And I like this idea, but I've got to see the spiral in practice. So let's just say that I'm going to put this down as a very difficult problem to solve. Enormous mana cost, lives or dies based upon the damage projection. But the mana cost is probably unworkable on this. So that's unfortunate if true. Okay, Spark of the Nova. This fires projectiles in a circle, very simple. And the numbers on this, so it's 200%, and we'll just compare that to baseline Spark's numbers again. So Spark is 190% damage, 6% crit, 650 milliseconds cast time, and 2 seconds for 10 projectiles. This is 14 projectiles. I feel like there's going to be less overlap on this. So the base numbers on this are looking reasonable. Oh, actually, 750 MS versus, what's the, versus 650. Okay, so, yeah, I am not sold on Spark of the Nova. I feel like this might be worse than baseline Spark, because it's not going to hit things in front of you as reliably, and the chance that monsters are behind you is not zero. There are definitely times monsters are behind you, but I feel like there's going to be times that there's not going to be anything behind you, and the monsters that are in front of you, i.e. the ones where you're casting your sparks, are going to slip through the cracks in this spell, whereas they wouldn't have slipped through the cracks behind you. So that's my first thoughts on Spark of the Nova, but it is something that you could definitely set up to be quite good on some builds. It also, with the name Spark of the Nova, it screams that this is going to have the Nova tag and therefore synergize with Astral Projector, which is something that's come up a couple of times in previous videos where I have called something a Nova and I've meant it in the imprecise sense. This is also in the imprecise sense. It's a Nova in the sense that players will look at this and think, hey, that's a Nova, but it's not a Nova in the sense that it is in the precise sense of this synergizes with Astral Projector. So that's unfortunate there. Now, you could have some uses here that go... You could have some uses there. Just going to quickly catch up on some of the things I've missed there in chat there. So there's the description of the last ones says it's leeching. Okay, I'll check that out in a sec. So that was one of the soul rends that I may have missed there. So that's... this one has spell damage leech to ZS. And leeching some of that damages energy shield. Okay, I feel like there's a mistake on Soul Rend of the Spiral here. So the green text mentions that it leeches. The blue text does not mention leech. It would need to specify how much leech there is. So there's the information that you'll need, that will need to get clarified there. That's something for the FAQ. Speaking of which, I wonder if the FAQ has been updated as yet. Let's just quickly bring that up, going back to the homepage here and seeing, have the FAQ things been updated? Yes, they have. Only with one question though. So that's, yeah, one new question that's come up so far. All right, so Spark of the Nova is something that I am not sold on. It's possibly too many gaps. Lower DPS than base, but will have a niche with aura stackers in Simulacrum. So just putting that note down there for myself. I've been posting these notes as community tab posts in YouTube, which are kind of hard to search for, but people who view my videos semi-regularly will tend to find them, and people who, like, YouTube will just show it to you without you expecting it, and people who are subscribed to the channel or people who like videos will see them more often. That's been my experience. So that's what I've been doing with those notes, or at least is what I did yesterday. Okay, what do we got here? Spark of Unpredictability. So this launches unpredictable sparks that move randomly with large differences in speed and distance until they hit an enemy and expire. 8 projectiles, 160% base damage, 2.5 seconds duration. So this is 2 second duration. 190% base damage and 10 projectiles. So you get 20 seconds worth of spark on both of them, and the damage is lower here. I can't judge this. Like, this says it's unpredictable. and we just don't have enough information to judge this. So Spark of Unpredictability, ability, as the name might suggest, can't judge this yet. Need to know the feel of it, of the gem. That's actually one of the hardest ones to assess so far that we've seen. It does something cool, and it's something that we've got. Now, there is no Chaos Spark. That is true. There is no Spark that is based upon built-in Chaos conversion. So Poison Spark builds are in a very bad way at the moment. There's basically not really any reliable ways to get Chaos conversion to make the Poison Spark builds work. So I feel like they might be one of those things that ends up being dumpstered by this patch. There are ways to do it, but they're pretty unreliable, or they require a lot of messing around. These don't pierce. Oh, thank you, Scott, for pointing that out. That's interesting, yeah. These don't mention anything about piercing, do they? Let's just confirm that that is indeed the case. Although... Base Spark doesn't mention pierce either. It does pierce. It does genuinely pierce. So I don't know what's going on there. I might just put a quick note here that this is going to be... Also doesn't mention pierce, but neither does baseline. And all right, let's have a quick look. Yeah, Voltaxic Rift is an option. The problem is Voltaxic Rift is giga rare now, so it's not something that you can say to people, go and get this item and you'll be able to make this build work, because as soon as people start trying to get Voltaxic Rift in any numbers, Voltaxic Rift becomes one of the rarest items in the game. Well, it's always one of the rarest in the game. There's basically a Spark not inherently Pierce. You just got to invest in Pierce. Oh, okay, cool. Here you can see that I haven't played with Pierce in a while, and sorry, you haven't played with it. So yeah, you have to invest in Pierce. So okay, that's fine. Here I was thinking it was baseline to the skill because I haven't played it in a long time. I have only ever run it with people who have a lot of Pierce. Yeah, so they invest in Pierce, and so it's yeah. I'd forgotten that it was not inherent as well. It does not inherently have it. You then invest in it on the tree and things like that. Because you can easily get, well, easily. At endgame, you can easily get +5 pierces on boots as well if you want. Okay, Spectral Shield Throw of Shattering. So this is going to be a cold-based version. It is going to do... Sharp projectiles deal 25% less damage. It is only evasion based. So this is basically the same as Shield Crush of the Chieftain, except this is the cold converted version. And we just want to check out the exact details here. So this is Spectral Shield Throw. This is a physical damage skill normally, and it's doing 100% baseline damage, 304 base phys, versus the Spectral Shield Throw of Shattering is dealing a little bit more damage, 100% base, and it's 750 milliseconds versus 650, so it's slower again. And primary projectile chains 3 times, fires 5 additional projectiles is the baseline. This is going to be 12 additional projectiles, but without chain. So this is changing the mechanics a bit. I feel like this will be better in a dense pack and worse in a... better in a dense pack and worse in general. I'm not sold on this. I just don't think it's got what it needs to be as good as the base gem. Shards deal more damage. Okay, let's just go through that. Shard projectiles deal 25% less damage, and they deal 50% less damage. That makes sense. Yeah, okay, so this is more clear. It's all cold, so it's converted for you, but I feel like if you're wanting to convert to cold, which you probably do, it's very easy to do that yourself at endgame, and you then have a bit more agency over it, but you're then forced into only scaling off evasion, which I'm not necessarily sure you always want the pure evasion shield. I think like you can definitely use one, and I feel like this is, yeah, pretty solid. People are mentioning the Anarchy's Price Divination card in chat with respect to Voltaxic Rift. Good luck finding that. That card is rare. That card is extremely rare. It hasn't been common since they gigabuffed Voltaxic Rift in 320. It used to be very common, so people have this idea in mind that it's something that's common and not on your loot filter. No, your loot filter drops. Your loot filter sings if you drop. If you drop it, you just don't remember that happening because it probably hasn't happened since the changes were made. So yeah, I think that I just much prefer the base. I much prefer the base skill dealing the physical damage, and then you convert it yourself if you want to. If you don't want to, you've got the agency to do something else. Converted damage will end up scaling up higher, and Spectral Shield Throw of Shattering joins the other automatically converted gem, Spectral Shield Throw of Shattering. I'm going to just call this... Do I call this Blair? I honestly think I go as far as Blair. Worse than base gem overall. Although it has a couple of things. A couple benefits. Evasion scaling forced. And doesn't make up for losing the benefits of conversion. Losing benefits of phys damage and conversion. So, yeah, I am definitely not sold at all. This one I'm going to be fairly dismissive of, whereas there's a number that I think are better. If you find a good use for Spectral Shield Throw of Shattering, then I would suggest you use that same shield with Spectral Shield Throw, and you convert it to cold yourself, and you do that instead. Granted, maybe you find a set of gloves that you can't use because you want to convert. Like, that might be a potential situation, but even if you're forced to use Harim Sorrow, and Harim Sorrow is really only starter gear, I still feel like you're content to use Harim Sorrow. Okay, Split Arrow of Splitting. Okay, so this is a ridiculous name. This should just be called Arrow of Splitting. So it fires one projectile out, and then that radiates outwards. This is meaningfully worse than base Split Arrow in terms of projection, but it looks like it might just have some good numbers here. Yeah, it makes up for it by being much faster and much better damage. So we have 56 to 85 added attack phys damage, versus here we don't get that attack phys damage, but we get 160% base attack and base damage. So there's a lot of benefits to this. Firstly, this is going to scale higher with better gear than base Split Arrow does. It has the most ridiculous name you've ever heard. And yeah, you just basically hit one... You've got to hit one target. If you physics miss your main target, or if you accuracy miss your main target, then you have just bricked your entire skill. But this is going to hit a fair bit of the screen. The problem is it's only hitting 8 targets. It can split without hitting a target, actually, now that I think about it. So, okay, that's a bit of an improvement. If you do physics miss, it's not a disaster. It's still going to be slow to come back and hit things. The name on this is hilarious, but I feel like this is this is ground. Well, no, I don't think it's ground targeted. I think it's wall targeted. I don't know how this is going to work if you just fire it into the ground. I think it'll just keep going in that direction until it either reaches the limit of your projectile distance, or alternately, instead of reaching that, it might reach. It might hit a wall. Barrage support is an option. I don't like this with barrage support, because barrage support's just going to add more splitting to it. Modifiers to number of projectiles instead apply to the number of projectiles it splits towards. I kind of feel like this is the sort of gem you would love very early in the game. However, you're not going to have it very early in the game. Late game, like, it's probably better than Split Arrow, but that's not a high bar to clear. And I don't like investing in anything that's adding more targets. Ice Wall no longer works for your own projectiles. Any projectile you cast pierces an ice wall. So that's something that doesn't work anymore. Nimbus and this should... I need to see the interaction with Nimbus and this. Again, that's going to come down to how exactly it hits the end of the projectile distance. The other thing is that projectile speed is going to be a huge factor on this. If you are firing them off into the ether, it's going to take a while until you apply damage. It's going to feel very delayed. And what happens with Sniper's Mark on this? I think that would just increase the number it splits towards. All in all, I am not sold on this, but it does have such a fast attack speed. Like, this is going to feel like Quill Rain gaming, even when you're not Quill Rain gaming. And that's going to at least be interesting. Yeah, Mana Forged Arrows is an option, but are you necessarily using... like, this will hit things around corners if you're triggering it with Mana Forged Arrows. That's going to be an option too. I am generally not sold on this. Yeah, I feel like Lightning Arrow outperforms... Like, the fact that Grinding Gear Games didn't nerf Lightning Arrow this patch means that most other bow skills almost may as well not exist. It's a slight exaggeration to say they might as well not exist. But Lightning Arrow and Tornado Shot... Lightning Arrow early league, Tornado Shot late league, those skills weren't nerfed enough to make other bow skills relevant. If they buffed other skills up to that level, then non-bow skills wouldn't be worth using either. Basically, as far as this competes with other skills, it's just not there. I think like the attack speed is great, but I just don't think the overall package makes it. So I'm going to say that it's that this is a no, despite that incredibly fast. Oh, hang on, it's not faster attack speed. Oh, wow. Okay, that makes it terrible. Here I was misreading this as, so it's attack speed 110, attack damage 119, and I had misread this as attack speed 160 and attack damage 160, but it's not, it's just attack speed 100. Yeah, okay, nah, split arrow of splitting, no. Arrow of splitting. I'm going to put a note here. I misread this as 160% base attack speed. And wasn't excited. Wasn't excited by those numbers. Imagine how disappointing it is. It is at 37.5% less attack speed. So yeah, that's going in my notes there that that I had misread this as being better than it was, and I still wasn't excited by it. Now that I know how bad it is, yeah, this is just... Like, it is a unique interaction, yes, I agree, Evil Fiendish. It is a unique interaction to have splitting, although it's on quite a lot of these gems now, but I don't think it just being unique is enough. It needs to be inherently strong as well, and you can get something akin to it with Sniper's Mark on tougher foes, and I just can't see this being useful. Okay, Splitting Steel of Ammunition. Again, these are incredibly messy skills to parse. So, didn't we have another splitting steel skill before? Or did we accidentally jump forward to this one? Oh no, Shattering Steel and Splitting Steel. Okay. So this is bringing back the complex interactions here. I'm just going to have a quick look. Splitting Steel. What's the... Splitting Steel. Here we are. So it's basically the ones... Okay, this gem. Yeah. This is one that's extremely complex. So 90% attack speed, 210% damage. And how does the Transfigured version look? It's 100% attack speed and 210% damage. Consumes steel shards to fire a single projectile. It splits on impact or at the targeted location, dealing area damage when it splits, and again when the split projectiles explode at the end of their flight. Requires a sword or axe. Steel shards are gained by using Call of Steel, which then adds a second mandatory button to this. And then there's a whole bunch of damage numbers on this. This is one of the Impale related things. Consumes up to 2 steel shards, so you can use it 6 times. And if you have no steel shards, then they count as already having split. So that means that you only get 1 projectile rather than getting your 1 that then fires out another 7. So it is massively worse if you don't have that. This is just the old version of it. Consumes 2 shards instead. That's correct. So that's something that we need to then... that's something we need to look into the details of. I'm just going to say Splitting Steel of Ammunition. This is functionally what currently exists, and I'm not convinced that this is going to tear up the meta or anything. But this is just returns existing Splitting Steel functionality. Complex skill. Requires a high skill cap. So this is not something to play that's that's like without a whole bunch of being okay with that playstyle. Doesn't have the less damage after splitting of the 322. It also consumes an extra shard. I'll put that as in the notes. Yeah, better uses 2 shards, unlike 1 in 322, but does full damage after split. So it's got its ups and its downs. That should help it with clearing. So yeah, it's not something that's jumped out as super exciting. Okay, here we go with Summon Chaos Golem of the Maelstrom. This one's interesting. So it casts a chaos damage over time aura. The minion can inflict withered on hit, and you can only have 1 golem. So this is going all in on 1 golem. Note that this is giving up on your ability to get physical damage mitigation out of your golem. And I just want to quickly check the Chaos Golem. So Summon Chaos Golem is... Oh, Golem's grant, so that's to you. Okay, so this is granting you that. Maximum 1 golem is actually the same text, so that is something that's bypassable. It's not a hard maximum. So this is this is basically trading in that is trading in the chaos spikes and trading in the PDR in exchange to get this wither effect instead. Okay, now I'm following what this is doing. So you are inflicting withering on a hit. This is going to be used a lot. I feel like this is going to be used not on chaos minions. This is going to be used as as basically a walking totem for you in order to inflict withered on builds that are hitting a lot with chaos. So that's intriguing. This is just a new version of Chaos Golem. It does something different. This is like Toxic Rain. Toxic Rain wants this. A bunch of other stuff. There's a bunch of gems that they haven't finished yet, so those are likely to come later. I don't know what's going to happen with Righteous Fire. I quite like this. This is just a different version of the gem. Minions have 20... Minions have... It's not minions grant 20%. I was reading it as grant because the Chaos Golem has it. So it's granting it to all your minions. Okay. Alright, sorry. So this one was actually quite tough to parse because it's... minions have that. It's not the specific minion, it's all of them. I think... Hang on, is this all your minions or is it just this minion? So that's the thing that's tricky. It's... what minions inflict debuffs at the moment? It's... I'm just trying to work out the wording on this. Is this minions summoned by this gem have 20% chance to inflict withered on hit? If that's the case, there's also this chaos damage over time, or this chaos damage over time aura that is withering enemies as well. We'll really need to see what this aura is like. Yeah, that's the key thing. That aura that withers in green is the key thing that makes that better or not. Because this could be very good, and it could be rubbish. Yeah, it's Arakali's Fang is the thing that, this is The wording here is just unclear, I think. So lots of people think it's all minions. That is my way of reading it. I believe it wouldn't be plural if it was only doing it the same way. Let's just check Carrion Golem. In-game Carrion Golem, what's the exact wording on this? Golems grant 27 to 41 additional physical damage for non-golem minions. So if this was intended to be all of your minions, then it might say golem grants 20% chance to inflict with it on hit for your minions. I feel like that's the way it would be written. But the key thing is that it's got this chaos damage over time aura. And we don't know anything about this. So this is something I'm going to say that we can't yet say much about this one. So summon Chaos Golem of the Maelstrom. Maelstrom. This is real. This lives or dies based upon the Chaos / Wither aura, which we don't know yet. No, much on yet. Much about. That's going to be the key thing there. I think we just can't say yet. Yeah, the aura isn't hitting, but the green text is clear that it withers enemies as well. So there's it casts a powerful chaos damage over time aura that withers enemies, and then in addition to its melee attack. The melee attack also is withering, according to the blue gem. So there's a bunch of... I just think we have to say there's no information to really say on this. And there's something to just experiment with and find out if it's any good or not. But for now, I'm just going to say it is unclear what exactly it's doing. Summon Flame Golem of the Meteor. Okay, so this is granting CDR. Wow, that's interesting. And when summoned, the Flame Golem attacks by falling from the sky, dealing fire damage in the area and leaving burning ground around the impact. After landing, it can cast a fire spray and wave of fire damage. Oh no, the cooldown recovery rate is not a buff. This is not a player buff like Flame Golem does. That is on this golem itself. So this is just drop a Flame Golem down as an attack. That's something that's falling. This is just falling zombie. And this is going to come down to how much damage it does. Like, most of the gems that we've got a clear indication of how much damage they do. For example, where's an example? It's not a raise spell, but that is a direct spell. Like most of our spells, Pyroclast of Sabotage, we know the exact amount of damage that this does because it tells us how much damage it does. Purifying Flame of Revelation, 200% base damage. It tells us that. This gem tells us nothing about how much damage it does, so this can't be judged as yet. And yeah, this is complex. The stuff with the people who are interpreting this as granting the minion, it would say Golem grants 20% chance to inflict with it on hit if it was intended to apply to the player's skills. That was my initial thought, but that's why I checked up some of the other skills, some of the other Golem skills that do grant things. So yeah, you are getting to keep fighting with this, so it's not exactly just a meteor, but we need to see numbers on this before we can really say anything. And I'm just going to put a note there that this is a cool concept, but we just don't know the numbers. So summon Flame Golem of the Meteor, hybrid minion, and direct damage spell. Might fit spiritual aid characters. Aid characters might be great, might be terrible. Maybe great or terrible. Depends on numbers. Depends on numbers, because we just don't have those numbers yet to judge that. This is like one of the least informative descriptions that we've ever had here. So note that the golems don't die. They do die if you recast a golem, if you go beyond your limit for the number of golems, but they don't just inherently die, and that cooldown recovery rate is not a bonus provided to the player, it is a mechanic of the gem. It's also a cooldown time of 2 seconds as well, Hey, that's cool. This is actually something you can cast quite fast. It has a 1 second cast time though. Golems are slow to cast. Ice Golem of Hordes. Now this grants that minion 40% CDR, and this is basically trading in any of the aura aspects of it to then just give you a whole bunch of extra, to then be able to cast more of them. So this allows you to summon 3. This is going to be so curious as to how it works. Like if you've got... I figure that if you summon 2 Ice Golems of Hordes, then you summon 1 traditional Ice Golem. I figure that the traditional Ice Golem will probably take out all the existing Ice Golems of Hordes as well. If you summon the traditional Ice Golem first, then you added 2 of these Ice Golems of Hordes. I'm not sure how that would work. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on. All Golems apparently are getting an Of Hordes gem as well. So that's for basically minion-based builds. That is for Golemancer builds that are not using the Golems for their buffs, but that are using them as combat minions. And that's going to be what this will be. I kind of feel like this is another example of something we've just got to play around with to judge this. There is a note below related to this gem, and yeah, so all of the summon golems are getting a variant like this, yeah, and there's also something in the FAQ along those words as well here. So everything is going to get something along those lines. So Ice Golem of Hordes is a very messy... it's just going to be one of those skills that we've got to play test and see how it works. I feel like this is... I feel like Golemancers need more help than this provides. And I think we've got one... We're +1 on the number of golems we could get last league. But I don't think that's going to be enough, especially given that you have the player buffs on the traditional Ice Golem and the like that sort of do add up. So I just put a note here that this is summon Ice Golem of Hordes. I don't think this gets there. I don't think the golems as combat minions playstyle necessarily has enough support yet. But may be wrong on this. Like, there are people who have managed to make summon Stone Golem work, and so if there's a Stone Golem of Hordes, that could conceivably be a functioning build. When I say functioning build, I'm saying be able to do a lot of content with it. We're not talking something that's terrible, but I just don't feel it's going to be amazing. Yeah, so Artemis Stone... Artemis Stone is only providing 1, but I think in a lot of cases you're probably not going to use the new Artemis Stone, whereas you would have always used it in the past. So for that reason, you may end up putting something else in that jewel slot, because then you're no longer requiring to use 3 primordial items. And so there's a whole bunch of... so that would then put you at the same number that you had before. It's unclear whether you would use that. I feel like you might be better off just using a Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Flesh setup instead. And that would be the way. Yeah, I have read the note there. It's that they're going to exist there on all of them. Hey Jim, welcome. So Artemis Stone is being nerfed. It's still going to be there. It's still going to give you +1 if you've got 3 primordial gems, 3 primordial jewels. But whether you're going to invest in that much for just +1, when you could instead have quite a lot more with that investment. Like, you get 4 entire jewels, so it's a big cost. Okay, summon Raging Spirit of Enormity. This is the one that has the very, very strict limit. I feel like this was a Crucible mod, wasn't it? This was the Crucible mod that caused a whole bunch of your basically Raging Spirits. You had a very low limit on them. I just want the base numbers of Raging Spirit at the moment so that we can compare this. So baseline, you get 20 Summon Raging Spirits. So this is now 8, I think. You have 30% chance to summon an additional minion. And let me just... Oh, what do you got there? There we are. Okay. Summon Raging Spirit of Enormity. So Minions have 88% more life, always crit, 40% crit multi, cannot taunt, and 5 seconds. What's the duration on traditional SRS now? Is 5 seconds as well. I feel like this is cool but not very good. That's my feeling on it. You get to maximum numbers of them very quickly, but I just want to see if there's anything else. Replica Midnight Bargain, that's a good point. That I'm going to definitely have a look at. So, Replica Midnight Bargain. So this is the one that gives you your minions additional movement speed, plus 6 to maximum number of summon raging spirits. Yeah, that's the key that's missing. Note that this cannot be used with Chaos Inoculation. It reserves 30% of life, which is a really painful drawback, but it's giving you a lot of payoff for it. And this is the use case. Yeah, this is the use case this needed. I had forgotten that item was there. Just going to quickly check a few things in chat at the moment because we are falling behind at the moment. So I feel like, yeah, minion instability in this. So what's the amount of hit points on these? They're 88% more life. Keep in mind that minion instability is worse on Raging Spirits than it used to be, and the minions have to die. Like, you have to actually get them to 50% health as well in order for that to work. So you could definitely make this work. Remember that there were a whole bunch of changes that took place with minion instability and summon Raging Spirit and the like. There was some core stats that were baked into the item, and I feel like, yeah, this could work with Midnight Bargain. This could be used both as to enable a critical strike SRS and also minion instability. And like, minions always crit there's a lot of cool stuff here. So let's just make a quick note on this. This is one of the more interesting versions, and we have SRS of Enormity. Lots and lots of so this has minion instability, shenanigans, also just general, also okay damage with Replica Midnight's Bargain. And Replica Midnight's Bargain is something I'm actually kind of curious how rare that is. I don't know if anyone has access to that spreadsheet where the heist curio drops are tracked. I can't find it at the moment. I can't find it while I'm on stream. But if anyone can comment with how rare, if you're in that discussion, if you can comment with how rare Replica Midnight's Bargain is, that would be useful because I just don't know. It's something that I feels like it's Replica Soul Tether tier. So, like, maybe 5 times rarer than the most common ones. But I'm not sure on that. Red Covenant is another one that you're talking about there. So let's just grab Red Covenant. I'm forgetting that item even exists because it's been off my loot filter for a long time. Red Covenant. I've not spelt that correctly here, or something. There's something about it that's Mark of the Red Covenant. That's it. So this is the one that gives Summon Raging Spirits a huge amount of increased damage, harshly caps your number of them, and causes them to do Ignite and to deal splash damage. Yeah, that works together, but 75% reduced. You'd have to use this in conjunction with... You'd have to get your number of... actually, how does that round? 75% reduced. How does that round? That's the big question. Does that allow you to have 2 without Midnight Bargain and 3 with? Or does it allow you to have 1 with it? There's a lot of cool stuff. Where minions sacrifice... So, Kotra's Regulator is the other one that... Kotra's Regulator with Necromancer's Aegis. So, this is... Kotra's Regulator. So, this is where you use Necromancer's Aegis to donate this to your minions, so that they get the benefit from it instead of you. Lose 15% of life when you deal a critical strike. Not necessarily 15%, but that's a build. This Replica Midnight Bargain and this Spectre of this thing of enormity. I feel like it is always round down, but I'm not confident of that. So yeah, you could also use Infernal Legion as another option as well. So there's a bunch of things you could do. I'm going to put a note here that this could be interesting with Kotra's Regulator on your minions, not you. And yeah, and then that allows your minion instability to definitely work. The other thing is that you could do that though with, yeah, no, you couldn't really do that with base, the base setup. This also just does a lot of damage as well. Like this is something that provides quite a lot of damage to your minions. So there's a lot of good stuff that's going on with that. Yeah, Kotra's Regulator is rare. I kind of feel like that's one that I need to warn people about. Kotra's Regulator is ritual exclusive from memory, and it is ritual exclusive. That's what, yeah, I'm being reminded here by the wiki page. So this is not an item you will find easily. I feel like it's in the tier 2 section of rituals, but I'd need to confirm that. I did have a screenshot of it somewhere on my PC, but I'd have to find that. Tavukai is another one as well, and that's something that is tier 3 rarity, but target farmable because it has a div card. Tavukai. And this is the one that gives your SRS increased duration, damage, maximum life, and causes them to take damage every second, which is the popcorn setup as well. So yeah, you've got Tavukai as an option as well. There's a lot of things. I kind of feel like though, if you wanted to go Tavukai, I don't think you want to use the large Raging Spirits necessarily. You might just keep them with the small ones. Have less damage per explosion, but more explosions. So there's a whole lot of things you can do here. There is, yeah, Formless Embrace, whatever the upgraded version of Zoph's helmet is now. There's a whole lot of things that you can do to mess around with. Yeah, Curious Mediator, there are ritual exclusive uniques. When you do a ritual, there's like a slim chance, maybe like 1.5% that you'll get one of the 4 of them. I think there's 4. I think there's 4 ritual uniques. And one of them is quite a bit more common than the others. So it might be like 70% of the time you get the common one and 10% you get each of the others. So that's Summon Raging Spirit of Enormity. There's a lot to unpack with this, but the cap of 6 Summon Raging Spirits definitely is something you want to expand via the use of Replica Midnight's Bargain. Then you could potentially use this with Kotra's Regulator, and then minion instability, as long as you're donating Kotra's Regulator to the mobs. That's probably going to be the new version of Popcorn SRS this league. And the SRSs will do quite a bit of damage too as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can play around with there. There'll be a bunch of other shenanigans as well. Let's jump on to Summon Reaper of Revenants. Maximum 3 summoned Reapers. Finally. So summons a Reaper which uses a variety of slashing area attacks. Presence of any Reaper weakens your other non-Reaper minions, and Reapers will eat them sometimes. So that will then, yeah, don't use this with Animate Guardian. Maximum 3 summoned Reapers, 40% movement speed, which is great to have. Minions deal 30% less damage. Reapers cause your non-Reaper minions to deal 29% less damage and have 29% less maximum life. Let's just bring up Summon Reaper for comparison here. So this is dealing 87% more damage with bleeding and has bleed shenanigans on it. And it doesn't actually have more baseline damage. So Summon Reaper is dealing 187% damage with bleed, and it also has the ability to inflict bleed. This is going to be summoning 3 Reapers that, as a team, do more damage than the single Reaper does, but that don't have the bleed shenanigans. And bleed is a lot of the damage of Summon Reaper. So this is a totally different build. And this one can't be commanded. Yeah, they're just going to run around, and you're pretty much only going to have the 3 of them. Can Reaper eat flying zombies? I think the answer is no, but we can definitely try and feed one. So this is definitely not going to fit on existing Summoned Reaper builds, and I feel like this has got to scale entirely differently. So this is dealing a lot more hit damage than the base Summoned Reaper does, but mostly Summon Reaper doesn't do very much hit damage, so this is an entirely different build. And it's lost the physical tag as well. That's interesting as well. So some of the easier ways to... Well, some of the ways that you could use in order to get a weapon don't work with it. But this is like, it's an interesting variant. I'm just going to put a note here that Summon Reaper of Revenants sacrifices bleed to deal twice the hit damage, roughly. Hit damage, which is usually bad, a bad deal, but you build differently. You build it differently. No phys tag, and 3 Reapers is factored in there. You lose command ability. I'm not sold on this gem, but it's at least just a different version of the skill. If people want to try something different, then they've got the potential to do so, and they can just see if this ends up being any good. Yeah, better for clear, worse for bossing, I think is quite likely. So, yeah, this is just a totally different skill. I feel like comparing this to original Summon Reaper is like trying to compare a bleed bow setup with snipe to someone who's using a bow with just hit based damage. They're totally different. Sometimes one of them will be miles better than the other, and I feel like this is probably the weaker one. Can you use this in... I don't think you can use this in conjunction with Summon Reaper, because Summon Reaper is capped at 1. So this doesn't fit existing Summon Reaper builds. It might make a new build possible, but I don't think so. Summoned Reaper of Eviscerating. So this summons a powerful Reaper, passively follows you without attacking enemies. The Reaper's presence weakens your other minions and will consume them. Using this skill while it's already summoned will cause it to dash to the targeted location and perform a powerful attack. Can be triggered or da-da-da-da-da. So this looks like it only does its ultimate. It does nothing until you command it to do its ultimate. And then when you do command it to do its ultimate, it goes Berserk. 87% more damage with bleeding. Versus this one is also 87% more damage with bleeding. And so it's just basically turning off all of the little attacks that this does. That's probably going to be worse in most situations, I think. But it's like, it is mostly like most of the damage. This is going to be better on bosses because it's not going to waste any time doing things that aren't its ultimate. It's just going to do the ultimate when you want it to. But this is going to feel really bad for clearing. No cooldown on the ultimate, so it's spammable. Its cast time is a second. What's the cast time on the normal version of the gem? Cast time is 600 milliseconds. So this is very much going all in on the strength of the Reaper, at the expense of giving up on its ability to passively help you clear. I feel like this is like probably... This is the high skill cap gem. Let's put it that way. This is the gem that performs really badly if you aren't a high APM player. If you are a high APM player, then it's going to really improve for you. And this is not something for... There's definitely not something for trash clear. This is very much a dedicated bosser build. So, Summon Reaper of Eviscerating. No, ultimate has no cooldown. Is slower to cast. Slower to cast. And otherwise same as base. And also Reaper is passive. Is passive unless commanded. Worse on bosses. Worse on trash. Probably to the point of being useless. Better on bosses. Unless you've got lots of other useful actions that your character can take while you're fighting that boss. So that's basically my first thoughts there. It does have an AoE, yes, but the clear is still going to be really bad because it's a 1 second skill. Like, essentially, the way I think of this, how do you feel about Glacial Cascade Softcast as a clear skill? Self-cast. I think the answer is it's not great, and Summon Reaper of Eviscerating is going to be the same. Except slower because it's a longer cast time. So, this is kind of intriguing at least. I think this is going to do some tricky stuff. Can this be? This cannot be triggered by anything. Can it be triggered, supported by Spell Echo or Unleash, or used by totems, traps, or mines? So you're not going to be able to do this with that. And yeah, you're not going to be able to effectively use these skills together. Very interesting questions come up from Ruben Jagdale about something we looked at before, which is Summon Flame Golem of the Meteor. What's going to happen if you make your Flame Golem pretty much die as soon as it's summoned by some means, and there'll be a bunch of ways to do that, and you are an Elementalist, I feel like it's going to auto-resummon, and when it resummons, it's going to do that boom. So this is a spellcast loop. This is a spellcast loop that could be really interesting, and I'm definitely going to go back to Flame Golem of the Meteor and give this one some thought. It's a 4-second cooldown after they die, though, so it's not quick. Oh, can it be... yeah, sorry, no. It's a 4-second cooldown, which is... not cooldown, 4-second respawn time on those golems. So, I don't think it's something you can use very reliably in a combat scenario, but it's just going to look fun. I'm going to put a quick note on there that this is... Summon Flame Golem of the Meteor. Should be hilarious with Elementalist auto resummoning, but in the funny sense, not the powerful, because 4 seconds is a long time. And let's hope it would help if I could spell time correctly in my notes, rather than ITME, which Spellcheck thinks I'm probably trying to type item, because that's a more commonly used word. Anyways, we will now jump over to having a look at the next gem. So we are now going on to Summon Skeletons of Archers. That's a really clunky name when they could have just said Summon Skeleton Archers instead. It would be cleaner. Anyways, this is just straight up summoning 3 Skeleton Archers with a cap of 8 Summon Skeletons. I just need to check the current summon Skeletons. So it is 8 normally, and it summons 3 Warriors versus 3 Archers. And this will be 3 Mages. Hey, that's really simple, isn't it? So these are going to be 16 mana, 500 milliseconds, 16 mana, 500 milliseconds, and that is 16 mana, 500 milliseconds. So they basically do exactly the thing you expect them to do. I think this is better than having a required gem, Dead Reckoning, that you needed to use in order to make this build function. Now you can just conjure it this way instead. So this is going to be a big upgrade if you want to play that specific play style. I feel like the Summon Skeletons of Mages has been the strongest of these 3 in recent times. But again, I really don't like the name. This should have been Summon Skeletal Mages instead. Like, it's just the of mages, the determination to make it have a suffix name ends up being worse. I agree, it is intended to be the literal skeletons of people who were archers or mages. The thing is that would then imply that you'd have to use them on monsters that had some affinity to magic or archery or whatever. This is the same number of mages you used to have. So this is the same number of archers and mages, I think, that you had by default. So it's the same number as the default skeleton gem had. And it's Vile Summon Skeletons that goes Berserk. Now, the big difference is Vile Summon Skeletons is just going to summon mostly skeletons. So if you get a Vile version of Summon Skeletons of Mages, your Vile version is going to be a bit disappointing, because most of the things that raise with that are not going to be mages, and therefore they're going to have wrong support gems attached to them. So that's going to be pretty disappointing there. Yeah, so this has the prismatic tag. I'm trying to think if there's anything that really plays off the prismatic tag well. It means that they will... I think that means that they change around. We don't yet know what the quality stat is on these. That is a good question. So the prismatic tag is something that gems usually have if they can do cold damage, lightning damage, or fire damage, but not all at the same time. For example, Elemental Hit, Wild Strike. Those are the classic prismatic gems. I'm just trying to think if there's any synergies for it, but nothing jumps out. So you can use this with combat focus. Can you? I'm just going to check if that... Does that actually... is that the current way it works, or is it like... It is all prismatic gems, is it? It's yeah, prismatic. Okay, that's a big deal. So you can pick whichever element you want. That is a big deal. All right, I wasn't aware of that interaction. That interaction was tied to the prismatic tag. I thought it was just to Wild Strike and Elemental Hit specifically. So yeah, combat focus is now the strong thing there. Did Dead Reckoning modify your limit to number of... let me just bring up Dead Reckoning. I thought it didn't change your number of jewels. So it's... oh, this is the new... Yeah, of course, this is being changed, isn't it? This is changing entirely. It's skeletons gain added chaos damage equal to a percentage of the maximum ES on your added shield. The history of this used to be... when it said... The current version of it that existed in 322, where it says summon skeletons can summon up to 15 skeleton mages, that didn't allow you to bypass your skeleton limit. So you'd have a skeleton limit. Now, Val Summon Skeletons was a bit better, though, with that, because it would then transfer those skeleton soldiers into skeleton mages up to that limit, whereas now you're going to be capped at 8. That said, yeah, that is intriguing. So we're going to then put a quick note down here that this is... Oh, Void Sphere of Rending. We're going to have a look at that in a sec. So, Summon Skeletons... Summon Skeleton Archers... Summon Skeletons of Archers. I'm just going to use that stupid name. Summon Skeletons of Archers is doing... does what it says. Does what it says. That's all there really is to say about that. I also need to check the gem tags on archers as well. It does not have any specific elemental... it does not have physical. I thought it may have had physical. Does base summon skeletons have physical? I feel like it does. It does not. Okay. Did that historically have it? I think it may have at some point. Anyways, it definitely doesn't now. It's easier to get +2 minions than +2 physical in any case. So, we now have Summon Skeletons of Mages it does what it says. Mages, prismatic, which does work with combat focus. So this means that you can now make a Skeleton Mages build that is a single element Skeleton Mages build, which is something that I don't believe has existed before. So that is something that is new. How does it not have projectile tag? That's a good question. I feel like that is a mistake by GGG. I might just ask that. Why does Summon Skeletons of Mages not have projectile tag? Why does Summon Skeletons of Archers not have physical tag? So I might just put a note to myself. FAQ. Why does Summon Archer Skeletons not have a physical tag? Why does... physical and projectile as well, right? Physical tag or projectile tag. And then the same question, but for mages, and this time it is not for... Well, why does Summon Mage Skeletons not have a projectile tag? I figure that is something that they should probably have, and that they don't currently. So that's my first thought. I actually feel that might be a mistake there on their end. Most minions don't get skills for their tags for their skills. I thought they often did. Doesn't? You just have a look at some of the others. Carrion, Golem. Carrying Golem is physical. Is that unusual? Is that a Golem thing? Ah, it might be a Golem thing. Because they are literally an embodiment of the element. No, Summon Raging Spirit's fire. Summon Reaper is physical. It doesn't feel like it's particularly consistent there. At least that's my my look there at what I see. It just feels like it's inconsistent whether it is or not. So just to clarify the prismatic tag, it means that it works in conjunction with the combat focus jewels. So if you use the combat focus jewel that bans lightning, then your skeleton mages will not cast lightning skills. They'll just be cold and fire. If you use 2 combat focus jewels, you can pick exactly which element they're going to use. Zombie has nothing as well, yeah. So it's all over the place. Maybe Grinding Gear games have a specific thing where they say, okay, only if there's a line of text that is very closely aligned to a particular element that they do it. But it's, yeah, that's going to be one that's going to be really tricky. So let's jump on to the next one, which is Sunder of Earthbreaking. So Earthbreaking was also the name of Leap Slam of Earthbreaking. So this is dealing 250% base damage, 90% IAS, and it is going to a number of enemies that are hit will release a shockwave, which deals less damage, and the wave deals 8 areas, damages 8 areas. Let's just bring up Sunder itself and do this comparison. So it's quite a bit less damage, but also quite a bit faster. So 75%, 325 versus 9250. These damage amounts are very close to each other, with the slight advantage going to Classic Sunder. And Classic Sunder and its shockwave behavior is that wave causes shockwaves from up to 5 enemies in each area. Wave damages 5 areas. 25% reduced delay. So it's much faster moving. Essentially, this feels like it's the same skill but faster. Wave causes shockwaves from up to 3 enemies in each area, dealing 40% less damage. Shockwaves deal 40% less damage, up to 5 enemies in each area. So, essentially, Sunder of Earthbreaking is a faster, lighter version of Sunder. That's basically this is like something that's going to just be faster in every way. Damage is just a smidgen lower, but not much slower. And so it looks, I feel like this is just better than baseline Sunder. Like, even though it's going to look worse in Path of Building, I think it's just that slight bit better because it allows you to be much more mobile, and it's damaging 8 areas instead of 5. I kind of feel like this is just better overall. So I'm going to put a note to that effect here. Sunder of Earthbreaking will be worse in POB. Will be worse in POB than Sunder. However, probably better in practice. Better in practice, faster, smoother, and better damage application. Application at cost of a couple of percent damage. So yeah, that is going to be 2% less damage overall, I think, based on my quick numbers. They could be wrong, and it just seems to be something that's going to be much faster and will be better all around. It's missing the line that the previous wave goes away. Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, much smoother then. That is actually, yeah, that just eclipses existing Sunder. Like, this is just a monstrous upgrade. So, just to clarify exactly what this does, Sunder of Earthbreaking, you donk the ground with it at 90% base attack speed. This then causes a damaging wave to spread in front of you. Monsters are hit by it, they do damage, they take damage themselves, and they release a shockwave. But the main thing is, it pretty quickly propagates from you forward, and ultimately just hits a large line in front of you. So you can think of this as the attack-based version of the classic lightning bolt concept from TTRPGs, where you're firing a lightning bolt that just propagates straight in front of you in the direction you're facing, except instead of lightning, it's just you donk the ground, and then there's an earthquake type effect that propagates in front of you. A good question about the lore behind these. I kind of feel like that's something that we don't know as yet. Like, it's Azaro's divine font. So maybe, like, we have the Goddess of Justice in the lab. Maybe the Goddess of Justice is reliable there. So that's possibly it. Yeah, this is very similar to pre-rework Sunder as well. I'll put a note to that effect as well. When was the rework on Sunder? I might just find that out, just so that I've got that information in the... get that information into the comments as well, because it was quite some time ago, and people really did not like the new version of Sunder. 3.11 is when it happened. Okay, so this is Delirium era Sunder back. This is Delirium era Sunder back. Replaces classic Sunder in all builds, basically. Not that people were really using Sunder, but I just can't imagine a world in which you want classic Sunder when you could have this new Uber Sunder instead. I feel like it's just better. Cody, so I used to love D&D 3.5, but these days I think this should answer that question. A whole bunch of my PF2E books sitting on my side there. That's been the game I've started to like. I feel like it captured the good parts of D&D 4E without the bad stuff. I like my attitude. D&D 4E drove me away from the franchise, but I thought that it had some really good ideas in it. Just that the rest of they were like surrounded by bad things. And then PF2E I found was better. In fact, if people Reddit stalk me, you probably know that I'm on the PF2E subreddit a bit now. Okay, so now that we've got that quick little off-topic aside, let's get to one that I think a lot of people have been interested in. What's going on with Void Sphere of Rending? This is not a cooldown skill, but it is an orb. So you only have one of them, but this is Void Sphere going to be something that is just a damage-based skill. This is what a lot of people wanted Void Sphere to always be. So this is the thing. This is cool. So, okay, it still has the hinder. I really need to see some of the stats here. So this is losing all of the knockback mechanics, which is fine. Okay, so this is 10-second cooldown, 75% base damage, versus here we have 190% base damage, and we have lots of damage. Base duration 2 seconds, pulses every 0.4 seconds. This is also pulse every 4 seconds, but much shorter skill. We have 2.4 meters. What's the range on this? 3.8. So it's more condensed. And then we have the 39% hinder is still kept. Wasn't expecting them to keep 39% hinder. That's cool. That is, I really like this. I really like this here. So yeah, I think this is a really cool setup. Where are we here? There's the whole, like, this is, I don't know that this is quite a main skill, but this is just all in on the damage, none of the crowd control. Well, not much of the crowd control, but it still has 39% hinder if you're in the center. This can be used with a whole bunch of things. This could be used for poison because it hits a lot of times. You could cast this. If you can land 4 hits with this, then this is going to be poisoning as though it's 760% base damage. I feel like there is definitely a poison build to be had here. I feel like this is going to do a lot of damage. What's the damage like on this Enraged Monkey is adding? So each tick of Void Sphere of Rending is, broadly speaking, doing slightly less than 2/3 the damage of a Wave of Conviction. So there's a lot of damage there. I feel like this is cool to try. I don't think this is going to be amazing, but I do think this is going to be a damage cooldown that's going to really dish out some pain if it's used well. Ironically, you might actually want to use this on top of Decoy Totem. So you cast Decoy Totem first, which functions like old Void Sphere did. It pulls enemies into it, and then you drop Void Sphere of Rending on it so that it hits many times. Clunkiness, I feel like this is going to be like... It's less clunky than Firestorm because you can keep moving. You can drop it and keep moving, but it has the Corpse Consume mechanic, which... So, a bit of history with PathOfExile. The most dangerous monsters in the 3.13 era were Porcupine Goliaths. And that was because clear speed was super high, but players were super squishy back then. Like, way squishier than even what you would term a glass cannon build these days. And so, you'd have, like, if you ran forward into a pack of porcupines and they died as you were running in them, they would often kill you. It was essential. If you wanted to get beyond about level 92 in that era, it was essential to have some sort of corpse removal. During this era, in Heist League, they added in Void Sphere as a part corpse removal, part crowd control, though, because of heist mechanics. And it was a fun skill to play around with, a utility skill that most people might want to use if you had 10 hotkeys and you also had 4 more sockets. But it's pretty rare to see it being used. If it is used, one other use for this is that you can use it in conjunction with power charge on critical, and it's quite a good way to get to cap out your power charges as well. So there's a lot of cool stuff on it, and it does, there's just a lot of cool stuff that this does. This has been a long-term player request. Like, players have wanted this for a very long time, very long time. So I'm glad to see this. I'm going to just put a note to that effect. Void Sphere of Rending. Yes, this can be a main skill with Poison. Poison, no, it will not clear well. But just because it doesn't clear well, it doesn't mean that it can't have some uses. And I think people will have some fun experimenting with it, trying to work out exactly what to do with it. I do think the key thing that's going to limit this is that 2.4 meter radius. On a 800 millisecond cast time, it's like mechanically it's somewhat akin to Firestorm. It's probably better than Firestorm, but it's just such a slow cast time that you're investing a lot into each use of it. So it's kind of cool. This was such a good Void Sphere in Heist is such a good skill if you undergear Heist. The thing is that you don't generally undergear Heist for very long because Heist caps out pretty low. Heist caps out at... because you don't really need to do transmuted or alked blueprints. It caps out at level 83 scoured blueprints, really, and you don't really need to go past that. Let's have a quick look at what we've got past here. We've got Volcanic Fissure of Snaking. This is already teased, and this is the one that... sacrifices all the projectiles from memory to... Yeah, sacrifices all the projectiles to then do more of those fissures that then erupt around, and then those fissures keep moving around and dealing more damage. I feel like it had way more projectiles, though. Let's just go Volcanic Fissure, not Val Volcanic Fissure. So fires 7 projectiles, and it only does 1 of these snakes. This one, fissures are up 3 additional times, so it's just different damage projection. Let's look at those damage numbers. 185% versus a slightly slower attack as well. I can't answer how good this is going to be. This is one that's got to be tested out. So let's just put down here, Volcanic Fissure of Snaking. Volcanic Fissure of Snaking. Needs testing. Needs testing. Slower attacks. Attack Vortex, then Classic. No projectiles. Need the feel of the damage projection. Once we've got that feel of how the damage projection is, then that'll allow us to assess whether this is actually better, worse, or corner case usable. Wouldn't surprise me if it's corner case usable. That's pretty common with a lot of these. Vortex of Projection is next. And yeah, the question of what quality is doing is, like, quality is just all over the place. Something just got eaten by automod, and I'm not sure what it was, so yeah. Sorry, I can't see what that is. I did see it in chat, and then I saw automod eat it, and I'm not actually sure what it was. Oh no, it was just retracted. Sorry, I just had a look in the YouTube backend. It wasn't something that was automod eaten. It was someone who's typed something and then they've changed their mind and realized they didn't want to say what they'd said. So that's cool. That's one of the things when you're streaming, you can't do that. Your mistakes end up being baked into the YouTube record of the stream, because I always leave these streams up, but there's always the odd mistake in them. So, Vortex of Projection. We're in the middle of looking at this. An Icy Blast explodes around the caster, dealing cold damage to enemies and leaving behind a whirling vortex which deals cold dot and chills enemies caught in it. If the caster targets this near their Frostbolt projectiles, it will explode from those projectiles instead, and this is the one that destroys them. So I was thinking Ice Nova was destroying the projectiles. No, this is going to destroy the projectiles here. This is initial hit and cold dot. 270% effectiveness of added damage is a lot. 50% more damage when cast on Frostbolt is a very large amount. So this is going to be 405% base damage when you cast this on a Frostbolt. And I'm just considering this as a hit skill at the moment. Obviously, Vortex has traditionally been played as a damage over time skill, but 405% base damage is a lot, especially given that you can do that from multiple ones. So it can explode from up to 5 Frostbolt projectiles. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is crazy. Like, you cast a bunch of Frostbolts, and then you follow up with Vortex of Projection as a hit-based skill. That just feels like it does monstrous amounts of damage. Like, monstrous damage. It's clunky, but think of it this way. Like, let's assume that you cast 6 Frostbolts, which you can do with one action, with one button press, and then those all go up to a boss, and then you detonate Vortex of Projection on top of that. You blow up 5 of those Frostbolt projectiles, and the boss just melts. Like, you've just hit that boss for 6 fireballs to the face, and you've only taken 2 actions. It's going to be... Yeah, you could have cast 2 extra Ice Novas, but the Ice Novas don't do very much damage in comparison. Like, what's the damage on the new Ice Nova? Let's bring up the Transfigured Gems Part 2. Second batch was here. So this is the Ice Nova version. We have Ice Nova. Ice Nova Frostbolts is only 130% damage and gets 50% more, and only goes off 4 of them. So, Ice Nova Frostbolts, per action that you take, this is dealing... And people were excited by this damage, right? People were excited by this damage. I picked it out as one of the best skills yesterday. This is dealing 780% base damage off 1 cast of Ice Nova Frostbolts. Vortex of Projection is dealing more than 2,000% damage off 1 cast of Vortex of Projection. Like, this is going to be the thing that you see one-shotting Uber bosses with hits. It's going to be Vortex of Projection this league. You could also use this, with cast on critical strikes as well. It's going to take a bit of messing around with. You probably need to automate your Frostbolt generation then. But I feel like the amount of damage this does is just terrifying. It's like, the clunk on this is off the charts. The clunk on this is really bad, but I think that there's just so much damage that this is worth it. And we're going to work out exactly how it works. Yeah, Ice Nova can spell echo. That is a point. So still, all that said, I feel like this is going to be the Cosprey's build of this league. Cosprey's going to generate a whole bunch of Frostbolts. So you'd have one that's like Awakened GMP, just generating 6 Frostbolts. And then you would then be having some other way of triggering a Cosprey's. Whatever ends up being... Not triggering Cosprey's, triggering Vortex of Projection to detonate all those Frostbolts. I feel like that's going to be tremendously big point-blank AoE. All of this is based solely on the hit component of Vortex. The other thing we haven't talked about here is that this is a really big Ignite skill, albeit a clunky one, because again, it's 405% effectiveness of added damage. So there's a lot of crazy stuff going on here. I think, yeah, you could use totems to throw Frostbolt. Yeah, you definitely need to generate your Frostbolts low effort, because you're going to be consuming a lot of them. You don't want to be spending player actions to generate all your Frostbolts. You want to be finding ways to automate that. There'll be a whole bunch of ways of doing that. You could use this and Ice Nova and cast on crit strike setups as well. Yeah, definitely think dual wield Cospreys has some use cases here. But I kind of feel like you want Vortex of Projection. You want to be focusing on maximizing the damage with. You might even. I'm just like this. This is going to require a lot of theory crafting, but the numbers on this are so high. The numbers on this are just so high that I feel compelled to play around with it. I will definitely have to look at exactly how that works. Do I think this could work with mines? No. The reason I don't want to recommend this with mines is that the strength of mines is that you can cast a lot of spells within the space of 1/3 of a second, but you're not going to have enough. You're not going to have enough Frost Novas easily without massive setup. You're not going to have enough Frost Novas there. So there's a lot of shenanigans. Yeah, Cospreys and Squire would be. I kind of feel like you might have, at some point you might have Cospreys and Squire as one setup and a cast on critical strike in your 6-link. So 6-link cast on critical strike setup, and then you've got Cospreys with triggering one of the gems. So that'd be Cospreys triggering Vortex. And then your 6-link is just set up to generate as many your 6-link is set up to generate as many Frostbolts as you can. That's another possibility. All in all, I'm actually quite excited by this. This looks bad, but the numbers are just so high on it. So high. So just answering Alexander Schindler's question there about why does Vortex have a crit chance if it's a dot spell. It is not just a dot spell. It's a spell that does 2 different things. You have to go all in on one of them. So I am talking here solely about the critical strike aspect of it. So critical strike hit-based component. There is instant damage, then there is lingering bad stuff on the ground. Most people who have played Vortex historically have focused on the damage on the ground, and the instant damage is actually a nuisance to them because it increases their susceptibility to elemental reflect rolls on maps. They would actually prefer not to have that there, but it is there and it is something you can scale up. I think Spellslinger would be something you would only want to use to generate your Frostbolts. I don't think you want to be triggering Vortex of Projection except with things that increase its damage. So you might use Poet's Pen or Spellslinger to conjure lots of Frostbolts, and then you would use a manual cast Vortex of Projection in order to detonate them. Because I don't think you want to waste your Frostbolts like that. You want to definitely hardcast these. Yeah, the dot component, the dot component is not specialized on this. GGG forgot to specify the radius on this gem. That's a good point. They didn't specify the radius on this gem, did they? That's a bit of a nuisance. But anyways, Vortex of Projection, unless the radius is terrible, this looks like it's something that's very specific use case. of projection. Hyper clunky, hyper damage. Hyper damage. Probably so good that it's worth jumping through the hoops. That it's worth ignoring the dot component and jumping through the hoops to use as crit. That's my thoughts on that. That is, this does not fit any existing Vortex build, but it's so good. The damage is so good on it that it's just got to be experimented with. Just on the hit component. Frostbolt Arcanist brand is another option. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to put a note to that effect. Maybe that is one of the better ones I've seen. Maybe Frostbolt Arcanist brand GMP. Yeah, GMP or volley or something like that. You need to have something that's projecting a whole bunch of extra damage there. Okay, we are getting close to the end now, so let's have a quick look at what we got left. We've got one last gem here, and then we've got any updates that have been made. Wild Strike of Extremes. Have a look at that cost. Have a look at that cost for cool. This has hits that treat enemy elemental monster resistances values as inverted. Oh, this is amazingly cool. This is like one of the funniest skills I've seen. 28 mana, 28 life, 28 ES. I just need the basic version of Wild Strike to have a quick look here, because that's something that's we need to see. 231%. Normally costs almost nothing, so the cost on this is extraordinarily high. Projectiles pierce all targets. Beams chain 7 times. And fires 3 projectiles, which we have exactly the same here. 90% AoE, 20% freeze, shock, and ignite, and 100% random conversion. This is also 90%. So, more damage, treats elemental, hits treat enemy monster elemental resistance values as inverted. What is there that buffs monster... Other than Blizzard Crowns, what is there that buffs monster elemental resistances? Because this is like, if you can deal with that cost, this is just going to be crazy. Your melee weapon strikes enemies. It's always got to be melee with this, doesn't it? Yeah, it is melee anyway. It's not melee or bow. It's melee only. So. This cannot be used with... this cost is really difficult to deal with. Like, I think it's so hard to find a way to deal with this, unless... there's no way to use this with a proxy either. So... This is crazy, crazy, crazy. Ultimods. Oh yeah, Ultimods are hilarious. This is going to be so funny with Ultimods. And also with Arch Nemesis mods that just juice up monster resists. You could just roll maps to have monster resists on them. Monsters get endurance charges and then suddenly they start taking more damage. General's Cry can bypass the cost you're mentioning. Or Trickster can handle a cost. And... how does this work with Doriani's prototype? Hugo is asking. You could use Doriani's prototype to set your character's lightning resistance to plus 75%, and then nearby enemies, that'll be projected to nearby enemies. The 75% lightning resistance you've got won't mitigate lightning hits that you take, but it won't hurt either. And that is an option. That will then cause your lightning hits to always treat the monster as having effectively negative 75 resist. I still don't think that's necessarily all that great. Trickster can definitely manage this cost. Inquisitor can manage this cost. Who else can recover life and energy shield simultaneously really well? I feel like it's just those two that do this amazingly well. Your mana leech, like the mana is fine. You can leech the mana. You can't reserve a lot of mana with a 28 cost attack. But you can reserve, like you'll need a fair bit unreserved, but you can manage that. Devouring Diadem is an option. Yeah, that's a good point. I was forgetting that was there. It's one of those things you always remember for its other mods. You could just do this with... You could just do this with Eldritch Battery as well. This is also prismatic, yeah. I kind of feel... You probably want this to be... Do you want to ban one of these? Maybe you do. You can use Rakiata's Dance with any melee to convert. You would not use this with Rakiata's Dance, so this allows you to run... like, this would be used in conjunction with an Anarchic Spirit Blade or something along those sorts of lines. Oh, it already converts all your damage. So it'd be used in conjunction with probably a Tri-Element weapon, actually. Yeah, if you go Eldritch Battery with this, it should be... like, it's going to really rip apart your energy shield. Really rip apart your energy shield. I don't think I want to go Eye of Malice with it. I feel like there's better solutions. You probably want to go a Blizzard Crown if you go, because that gives... I think a Blizzard Crown gives you a lot of damage anyway. It's a real piece of gear, and it also treats their resistors 10 points higher. And one thing that this is not going to do well, this is not playing well in a group. The other thing that's cool with this is it's just going to encourage really weird gearing. Like, you're going to just want to... You're going to want items that other people don't necessarily want. This is one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time. Watcher's Eye Energy Shield on hit is another good one, yeah. So there's a lot of things you can do here. So Wild Strike of Extremes. Very well named. Huge damage. Requires huge sacrifices, as the cost is non-trivial. And yeah, like, that is really a non-trivial cost. You got to mess around a lot to make that work, but the payoff is definitely there. And this isn't going to work on a totem, I don't think, because what totems are there that can make an attack with a strike skill? There are totems that can make attacks with a bow skill for you. I think, yeah, there's totems that can make them with a bunch of other things, but you're not going to get it there. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. You're going to need a huge amount of ES, aren't you? You're going to need a huge amount of ES on hit. So Watchers is not going to be enough. It's going to be like... It's probably going to be 200 mana, 200 life, 200 ES. You need Leech. So basically, I think this is going to be... Trickster, Leech, or Inquis Regen will help, but but cost is a real problem. And yeah, I don't like. There's nothing that really reduces costs in a monstrous way either. It does not have the line dealing no damage on elements. It was not picked, you're saying. So let me just confirm that is on Wild Strike, isn't it? So that just means... Wild Strike doesn't have that either. Wild Strike doesn't have that text. This is... Yeah, like, this is just really cool. 3 projectiles. If it goes a projectile version, it's... I always really like this. It's just crazy. Yeah, you can use a Gemini Claw. That's another thing that will help with this. It's still not going to be enough mana. You're going to need Mana Leech, and the other thing you've got to be aware of with Mana Leech, you need enough mana recovery per second from it as well. I think you definitely need to be a Claw base. That's true. It's definitely got to be Claw. So let's say Trickster Leech with Claws or Inquis Regen will help, but the cost is a real problem. EB is an option, but ES recovery will need to be extreme. Extreme, not just a couple hundred a second. Think RF level. Okay, so basically, if you can get Righteous Fire level recovery on mana, life, and energy shield simultaneously, maybe not even quite Righteous Fire level, but something a bit close to it, you can get there. And Essentia Sanguis is an option, yeah. So there's a bunch of things you can do there. Claws have low phys DPS, I agree on that, but I don't think that matters when you've got so much damage coming from the skill, and elemental damage mods on claws are pretty ridiculous now. Could you use the Wildwood Ascendancy to turn Energy Shield to life and grant... I just need to check how that works, RT Remain. I'm not actually certain how this sets up. But if you can solve the recovery problems, then this is going to have an extreme payoff. Sorry, I just had to have the bad pun there. And so there's a lot of just cool stuff there. Okay, that's the end of the Transfigured gems. Let's just what I will do at this point, I'm going to keep the stream going for a second, have a look at the other news that's come out today. But my first thing is going to be to just update this stream's details. What do you call it? There's the details page on the stream that I have access to. If I can do that now, I think I can modify that while it's live, can't I? Can I change that? Can I modify the... I don't know that I can. Oh, well, as soon as the stream ends, one thing I will do is I will go and edit in all those notes that I've put out, that I've produced there. So we'll go through those in a sec, but the last thing I wanted to do is just check what other news has come out today so far, if anything. So anything here is actually new to me as well. It's my first thoughts. So recently asked questions seems to be the only thing here. And we have just the golems question. So all the summon golems will have the Of Hordes Transfigured variants. And this is going to be something that will be available there. Alrighty, I think we are pretty much done in terms of going through all of these new gems. Thank you all for tuning in. And my next plans are that I want to try and come up with a core shell for players who want to play a spell totem build. Because I think the spell totems are going to be one of the best ways to try out a lot of different gems this league. Second thing I want to try out is coming up with a shell for cast on critical strike, which again is something where you can modify the payload pretty easily. The idea here is that you can try 6 or 7 or 10 different gems and probably only need to respec 10 points for each of them. So that's a number of things that we can consider. Rabman the Wise has just noticed that Replica Covenant is going to potentially be crazy with this as well. Yeah, there's a lot of damage on this gem. Like a lot of damage. Replica Covenant's level 29 added cold is substantially more damage than you get from the Awakened added cold support level 5 as well. The other thing, so for instance, Obsolete Tortoise is saying, going to start with Divine Eye Totems, but if it turns out that you don't like Divine Eye Totems, then you can just go, you know what, I want to try out Cracklance of Disintegration, and you can just respec your build from Divine Eye Totems into Cracklance of Disintegration Totems, and you're probably only going to need 10 or 20 regret points to do that. And then if that turns out disappointing, you can then go, alright, I'm going to change over to something else that's still a totem build. So that's really good. You could try the new Soul Rend, the Soul Rend that doesn't have any damage projection, but that has all the damage. And then you got to unspec your elemental damage nodes and pick up some chaos damage nodes. But again, that's all doable within 10 to 20 points. Maybe you change a cluster jewel or two as well. So that's my intended plans for the rest of the day after I do a few other things IRL. But looking like everything's good. I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlobs have interesting results, and I will see you